Chapter 657. Yang Yi was going to the Shanghai TV station to discuss something, so he couldn't bring Shi with him. However, since he didn't bring Shi, the little girl put on an aggrieved look, which made Yang Yi's heart ache. In addition, if Shi didn't go, Murphy would have to take care of the two children at home. Even if her grandparents were there, Shi's bathing and sleeping would still be taken care of by her parents. Now that Tong Tong was too young, Murphy definitely couldn't take care of her all by herself. Therefore, Yang Yi had to think of another way. Shi finally got what she wanted, and she happily went out with her father. Zhongqing wasn't far from Shanghai. Yang Yi used to drive directly to and fro, but Yang Yi thought that since he brought Shi out today, why not let her experience ordinary transportation with her? If she always took a car, Shi wouldn't know the lifestyle of ordinary people. Yang Yi didn't want a spoiled daughter. Shi didn't have any objections. On the way to the train station, the little girl chatted a lot with her father. After getting out of the car, she said, "Papa, I know how to say English on the train. Teacher Shan taught us how to say it." Yang Yi patiently responded to his daughter while paying the taxi driver. "The bus is the bus, Papa's car is the car, and the train is the train," she said as she reached out to let her father hold her. There were many people outside the station, and the environment was noisy. Although she was still smiling happily with her father, she was inexplicably flustered in her heart. Only when her little hand was wrapped in the warmth of her father's big hand did the little girl feel at ease. Yang Yi pressed down on his cap, and then he pushed the big suitcase while holding Shi's little hand and walked to the ticket window. Now that it was the spring festival season, many farmers who came to Zhongqing to work took the train home to celebrate the new year. Although Zhongqing wasn't as prosperous as Beijing, Shanghai, Yongqing, and other big cities, it was still the provincial capital of Jiangnan. There were a lot of migrant workers, and there were more than 10 long queues at the train station's ticket window. The entrance to the station was also jammed. However, there was an advantage to taking the train, especially at this time, because no one could recognize Yang Yi. The migrant workers didn't pay much attention to the entertainment industry, and Yang Yi didn't deliberately dress up. He looked like an ordinary person driving a car with a child. Who would think that a big star didn't take a plane or a train? And a child. Looking at the anxious faces around him, Yang Yi decided not to lower his head and calmly led Cici to line up. "Papa, what are we doing?" The little girl looked around curiously, but as Yang Yi went deeper into the line, she could only see a few legs. Finally, she was a little impatient. She pulled her father's hand and asked in confusion, "Papa just told you that we have to line up to buy tickets." Yang Yi knew that his daughter was bored, so he picked her up and smiled. "We have to line up. There are so many people." The little girl looked in front, hugged her father's neck, and pouted. "No matter how many people there are, no matter how long the line is, we have to follow the rules. Lining up is respecting others, and others lining up is respecting ourselves, don't you think so?" Yang Yi said gently to Shi. Although Yang Yi spoke in a sanctimonious manner, in fact, he was the person who was most unwilling to follow the rules, especially in his previous life. Rules existed in name only in front of him. But it was the same reason that adults who like to play games didn't want their children to play games when they were educating them. They hoped that they would put more effort into learning. Yang Yi hoped that his daughter could live like a normal person, and be liked and respected by others. The little girl blinked her eyes, seeming to understand the meaning of her father's words. Then, she nodded her little head, opened her little mouth, and smiled brightly. "I know." Lu Weisha also said that we have to line up for lunch. However, there were still many people who didn't follow the rules in life. For example, there was some commotion in the crowd at the back of the line. A shifty-looking guy was sneaking around, and it didn't seem like he was going to line up. Yang Yi saw it, frowned slightly, and became vigilant. He thought that this person was a thief. But now that he had his daughter, it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. Yang Yi just looked at that person, and didn't move. It was best to stay out of each other's business. But that guy had his eyes on Yang Yi. He saw Yang Yi in the crowd, and it was mainly because of Yang Yi's height. He looked at Yang Yi's bright clothes, and his face lit up with joy as he walked over. Yang Yi's face became serious, and his left hand, which was holding the suitcase, was ready to go. Who knew that after the guy came over, he would laugh and say, "Boss, do you want a ticket? There are tickets everywhere, so you don't have to line up so long." Yang Yi was speechless. It turned out that this guy was a scalper. It was such a waste of his shifty-looking eyes. No need. Yang Yi waved his hand, indicating that the scalper should go away. Confused by Yang Yi's disappointed expression, the scalper didn't give up. He pestered him with a few questions, but fortunately, he left before Yang Yi became impatient. Shishi curiously looked at the man's back as he left. After a while, she turned around and asked, "Papa, who is he?" "He sells train tickets, but he doesn't sell them normally." Anyway, there was nothing to do, so Yang Yi explained to his daughter, "This kind of person either sells fake tickets to passengers, cheats everyone of their money, but can't get on the train, or he sells them at a very expensive price. If we buy tickets from them, the interests of those who follow the rules will be damaged, because these people may take more tickets and sell them at a more expensive price. Then, people who line up to buy tickets at a normal price will not be able to buy them." She was confused by her father's words. The little girl couldn't understand these complicated things, but she still understood one thing. She looked in the direction of the man and said, "Papa, so is he a bad guy?" Yang Yi thought for a moment and said, "He can't be called a bad guy, but he's definitely not a good person." "Then we can't be good friends with him." The little girl looked at her father with bright eyes and said affirmatively, "Yes, she is so smart." Yang Yi smiled. Yang Yi talked with his daughter while waiting in line. He felt that waiting was quite meaningful. At least, she could see many things that she couldn't see at home or in kindergarten. Yang Yi and the staff bought 2 ordinary seats side by side, and then he took Shishi into the station. Of course, the station was still very crowded. From the entrance to the waiting hall, and then to boarding the train, Yang Yi and she squeezed through the surging crowd. Especially when they got on the train, many people rushed up and squeezed Yang Yi and the luggage. Fortunately, Yang Yi held she in his arms. The little girl put her arms around her father's neck and nervously looked at the people who were like hungry tigers rushing past them. Her big eyes were overflowing with worry. "Papa, I'm scared," the little girl whispered. It was the first time she saw such a terrible scene. However, such a small voice was suddenly drowned out by the noise of the surrounding trains and noises. She finally whispered in her father's ear for the second time, and Yang Yi heard it. "Papa, I'm scared. I want to go home." "Don't be afraid, Papa will protect you." Yang Yi carried the suitcase in one hand and held she in the other. He didn't have free hands, so he could only move his fingers and pat the little girl's butt to comfort her. It was not easy to squeeze onto the train. The aisles, the junction of the carriages, and the door of the bathroom were all crowded with people. Some people were waiting for the people in front of them to pass so that they could find their own seats. There were also people who bought standing tickets and scrambled to find a place to put the folding stools they brought with them. Those who brought their own foldable stools were experienced passengers. Many of them had to stand or even use their own luggage to cushion their buttocks. She leaned on her father's shoulder and looked at these people curiously with her big eyes. She must have a lot of questions in her heart to ask her father, but now was not the time to talk. They had to find their own seats. "Brother, move forward, don't stay still." Yang Yi had to shout and move forward with difficulty. Finally, they arrived. Yang Yi flipped through the ticket in his hand and glanced at it. Then, he looked at the 2 people in his seat. 6th carriage, 1703, 1704. "Brother, you found the wrong seat, right?" Yang Yi narrowed his eyes and looked at the 2 people sitting in his seat and said. Chapter 658. There was indeed some chaos in the world where darkness and gray intertwined, such as pickpockets in train stations and various disputes caused by occupying seats on trains. When Yang Yi saw 2 people sitting in his and she seats, he couldn't help but think of those rascals. Therefore, when Yang Yi took out his ticket and identified it with the other party, he was already prepared to use force to solve the problem. However, although there were indeed some rascals in the world, Yang Yi didn't encounter any today. Just like the scalper whom he mistook for a pickpocket, Yang Yi was destined not to have a chance to show his power today. Ah! Yes, your seat. The two young men stood up awkwardly. Please sit, please sit. When they passed by Yang Yi, they whispered and complained to each other, "It's all your fault. You chose this seat. Everyone else bought a ticket. How would I know? Why don't you choose?" Really? It turned out that these two young men weren't rascals, but passengers who wanted to take advantage of the standing ticket. The price of a standing ticket was the same as the price of a hard seat. If one could buy a hard seat, most people wouldn't buy a standing ticket. However, Yang Yi's ticket was different. When he arrived at the station, the ordinary hard seats had already been sold out, leaving only some tickets for soft seats. Of course, the tickets for soft seats were much more expensive than the hard seats. Many people couldn't bear to spend the money, so they went to buy standing tickets. These two young men were among the smarter ones who bought standing tickets. They probably ran over to the soft seats to try their luck. If they were lucky enough to sit on the soft seats that no one bought, they could save themselves the pain of standing in the narrow aisles for a few hours with others. However, they were unlucky. They sat in Yang Yi's seat. When they got up, the rest of the soft seats were all occupied. There must be other people who came to try their luck. They could only helplessly carry their luggage and stay in the aisle. Yang Yi looked at their backs, shook his head gently, and ignored them. He let she sit in the car first, and then he stuffed the suitcase into the luggage rack before sitting next to his daughter. After the little girl sat down by the window, she excitedly twisted her little butt and leaned against the window to look out. There was another train parked opposite the train, but there were still passengers waiting to get off. People poured out of the long train and then gathered into a long black line. This scene was quite spectacular, and she couldn't take her eyes off it. She, come, drink some water. Yang Yi took out she's small kettle from his backpack and poured some hot water for the little girl with the lid. He asked her to turn her head around and handed it to her. Cici turned her head and took the lid of the pot. Drink slowly. Try the temperature first. It might be very hot, Yang Yi warned. Papa, there are so many people on that train. The little girl looked at the hot water and didn't dare to drink it. She first told her father about her discovery. Well, yes, it arrived at the station. These people are coming back to Jiang City. However, there are also many people on our train. Didn't you see when you got on the train? Yang Yi said with a smile. I saw it. There are so many people that Papa is going to be squashed. Fortunately, Papa is strong. She was so happy that her eyes were curved. Let me teach you a sentence to describe many people. You can say that there are too many people, just like dumplings, they are all crowded together. Yang Yi said to she with a smile, "Do you remember the dumplings we ate during the festival last time? A lot of dumplings are crowded together. Think about it. Isn't it very similar?" Dumplings. The little girl thought this word was very funny. The train slowly started. The current train was not as clanking as the green train more than 10 years ago. It didn't make so much noise, only a little fluctuation. She looked out of the window at the buildings that were moving backwards. This novel scene made the little girl unable to move her eyes away. Well, look at it after you drink the water. Your water will be completely cold soon. Yang Yi had to urge her. Cici was still very obedient. The little girl's two small hands held the lid of the pot, and her small red mouth was placed on top of it. She took small sips, and the warm water was finished in a short while. Do you want more? Yang Yi asked with a smile when he saw her unsatisfied look. Yes. The little girl nodded. She was really a little girl made of water. She usually drank a lot of water, but there was also an advantage. Her skin was very tender and smooth like her brother's. Even in winter, it still looked like water could be squeezed out of her skin. After Yang Yi let she drink the water, he twisted the lid of the pot and turned his head to see two aunties on the opposite seat looking at his daughter with a smile. Yang Yi still wanted to look away, but it was too late. One of the aunties said, "Your daughter? How old is she? She's so pretty." She heard someone praise her and also looked away from the window. She was a little embarrassed as she squeezed next to her father and looked across with a blushing face. "Auntie is asking how old you are." Young Yi touched his daughter's little head lovingly and said with a smile, "Auntie, I'm 5 years old." She said shyly, "Ah, this girl is so pretty and has such a sweet mouth." The auntie said happily, "You haven't started school yet, right?" 5.5 years old. I'll start primary school in the second half of this year. Just like this, Yang Yi had no choice but to chat with the talkative aunties. She's experience on the train was a lot of new things. Even when the train attendant pushed a cart of drinks and snacks over, although it wasn't anything rare, the little girl curiously propped herself on her father's body and looked at it for a long time. In the end, Yang Yi bought 2 packs of plums and asked her to share them with the 2 aunties. However, she drank a little too much water before, so after half an hour on the train, she wanted to go to the toilet. In less than 2 hours, she actually needed to go to the toilet. But children couldn't hold it in, so Yang Yi had to take she to the toilet at the junction of the train carriages. There were also many people standing there, and Yang Yi even saw the 2 young people from the beginning. When he brought she over, the others stood up reluctantly and made way for them. She looked at these people curiously. Although her father had explained to her why these people were standing and squatting, she still felt it was strange. "Papa, it's so dirty." After entering the toilet, she looked at the dirty pit and pouted, looking very disgusted. It was indeed dirty. Yang Yi couldn't stand it. It seemed that this train experience had happened once, and he probably didn't want to do it again. Even if he did, he would try to pick a high-speed train or a train with fewer people in the future, so as not to squeeze in during the Spring Festival. But the problem still had to be solved. In an urgent situation, no matter how difficult the environment was, they had to face it, right? In the end, she went to the toilet under her father's protection, and then escaped from this dirty and smelly place. Fortunately, Zhongqing and Shanghai were very close, and the train finally arrived at Shanghai after more than an hour. When they arrived at the station, Cici, who had been a little depressed before, had already recovered. She sat on the suitcase and let her father push her. Then, she giggled and said, "Papa, let's hurry up. A lot of people are going to catch up with us." In fact, Yang Yi didn't know how Cici connected the dots. She actually thought that this little trip out of the station was a racing game. However, infected by his daughter's happy mood, Yang Yi also protected the little girl with one hand and pushed the suitcase with the other. He smiled and quickened his pace. Chapter 659. Of course, Yang Yi's main purpose in coming to Magic City this time was to discuss the limit challenge with the people from Magic City TV station. Therefore, after meeting up with Yun Yongfeng at the TV station, Yang Yi asked Yun Yongfeng's female assistant to take care of Shi. Then, he and Yun Yongfeng met her best friend under Luo Xian's lead. Luo Xian's best friend was Magic City TV station's deputy director, Lady Cui Jilin. Deputy Director Cui was about 50 years old, but she maintained herself well. Although she did not look like she was in her 30s like Luo Xian, there were no wrinkles around her eyebrows. Her face was rosy, and she looked graceful when she smiled. Obviously, she and Luo Xian had the same hobbies and topics when it came to fashion and skincare. However, public and private matters were private. If Yang Yi's The Limit Challenge wanted to grab the vacant prime time slot in an environment surrounded by wolves, they had to prove the value of their show to the other party. Only then would Cui Jilin fully support the Limit Challenge's promotion in Magic City TV station. Just like before, Yun Yongfeng was eloquent. He came to talk about the Limit Challenge's model and selling points to Cui Jilin. This fellow had a glib tongue, describing the Limit Challenge as interesting. Cui Jilin sat there and listened, all her attention drawn by the proposal. "Manager Yun, I admit that the show you're talking about is interesting and has a certain possibility of success, but I still have a question." Cui Jilin put down the proposal in her hand and asked, How can you ensure that Magic City TV station and China Star Productions can both obtain good benefits for this show? After all, it's a brand new show. Saying that it's exciting is just empty words. I need to convince others, so why don't we give this opportunity to other shows? For example, Celebrity Kitchen Challenge during the daytime. Cui Jilin wasn't joking. She said seriously, "I'm not afraid to tell you that the station values this show very much because it's the best daytime show. The ratings are stable and it's well received by the audience. That's because our show is more interesting and exciting. Celebrity Kitchen has a lot of limitations. Its studio is set in a fixed kitchen, so it can't bring more fresh things to the audience. However, our show is different. Every episode, even when we switch missions in the middle, the location is different. We use a lot of props, such as boats, cars, mobile phones, etc. These can bring us a lot of high-quality advertisers." Yang Yi said. It wasn't rare to see advertisements on variety shows. Even soft advertisements and product placements were common. However, Yang Yi believed that the overwhelming product placements of his show would give the variety shows in this world a brand new concept that hadn't been invented yet. Seeing that Cui Jilin was vaguely moved, Yang Yi took out the trump card he had brought today from his bag. It was the photocopies of the 2 sponsorship contracts. This is the sponsorship contract for Sahara Online Mall. It's 30 million yuan, and it's only the title sponsorship for the first season. There's also the product placement contract for Micro Broadcasting's mobile app. It's 10 million yuan, Yang Yi said as he handed it to Cui Jilin and looked at Luo Xian gratefully. Luo Xian had instructed Yang Yi to do all these preparations. Luo Xian clearly knew what was needed to convince the people at the station. Nowadays, the advertising fees for variety shows had not soared to the point of hundreds of millions. However, Yang Yi didn't give any discounts to his own people. This was the standard advertising fee in the industry. Moreover, it was for primetime variety shows. Luo Xian smiled enviously and said, "That's a big deal. Yang Yi, the 2 sponsors you found are very generous. My show only receives 60 million yuan a year." One had to know that Jixin's interview was one of the top variety shows. Its popularity and viewership ratings were high. It was only limited by interview shows. Her advertising sponsorship was still some distance away from comprehensive variety shows. However, the revenue she earned was also at the top of the pyramid. Yang Yi was willing to let his company invest such a large sum of money in his own show. On one hand, he was confident that as long as the Limit Challenge was successful, the impact it would bring to Sahara and Micro Broadcasting would definitely be much greater than the 40 million yuan spent on advertising in newspapers or other places. Thinking back to the sponsors in his previous life who were willing to spend hundreds of millions or even hundreds of millions on the title sponsorship of The Voice, weren't they doing so because they could earn more from it? On the other hand, Yang Yi wanted to use these 2 sponsorships to set a benchmark for the first season of The Limit Challenge. He couldn't let other people's advertising fees be higher than the title sponsorship fee, right? It's not just 40 million yuan. I'm confident that after our show is produced, there will be more companies who want us to help them with their advertising. Yang Yi said confidently to Deputy Director Cui, "When that time comes, we'll only lament why we have so few advertising slots and why we can't earn money even though we have it." Of course, he wouldn't crazily place advertisements and ignore the content of the show. He would definitely prioritize the content of the show. Under the premise of ensuring that the show was exciting, he would use subtitles to advertise for the sponsors. Director Cui, think about it. We still have high-quality sponsors like cars, clothing, and mobile phones that haven't been confirmed yet. The benefits these can bring to us and Magic City TV station, can they be worse than Celebrity Kitchen? Yun Yang said to Cui Jilin, seizing the opportunity. Cui Jilin flipped through the photocopied document in her hand. The 40 million yuan was enough to move her. What was more, there was an even bigger pie in it. She smiled gently and said calmly, "Of course it's not worse than Celebrity Kitchen. I believe that after seeing this, the people in the TV station will make the right choice. Don't worry, for Luo Xian's sake, I'll fully support you. I hope to see The Limit Challenge Shine in Magic City TV Station. There was no need to elaborate on the pleasantries that followed. Cui Jilin still had to discuss with Yang Yi the details of the profit distribution between Magic City TV Station and China Star Productions, so it wasn't convenient for Luo Xian to stay and listen. Coincidentally, Yang Yi had also handed over the full authority to Yun Yongfeng and the other professionals. He walked out with Luo Xian. "Where's your daughter? I heard from Murphy that little she came along too. I haven't seen her in person yet," Luo Xian said to Yang Yi with a smile. "She's visiting Magic City TV Station. I want to see where she is now." Yang Yi was also worried about his daughter. He quickly took out his phone and called the female assistant who took care of Shi. After a while, Yang Yi and Luo Xian saw the little girl outside the recording studio of a program. Shi, who hadn't seen her father for 2 hours, couldn't wait to see him. When she saw her father, she immediately ran over excitedly and jumped into her father's arms. "Papa!" The little girl's clear voice attracted many people's attention. "How did you play with Auntie?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. "We went to watch someone else shoot a TV show." She smiled brightly. She classified filming a variety show as shooting a TV show. A lot of people sit together and then everyone claps. "Papa, don't their hands hurt when they clap?" She knew that if they clapped too hard, their hands would hurt and even turn red. Yang Yi was happy and said, "No, it's their job. They're used to it. Come, Shi, let me introduce you. This is Mom's good friend, Auntie Luo Xian." Yang Yi didn't neglect and quickly introduced her to Shi and Luo Xian. "Little Shi, hello. Your mom often talks about you." Luo Xian smiled and waved at Shi. Luo Xian didn't know if it was to flatter her singlehood or something else. But when she saw Shi, her maternal instinct was aroused and her eyes were full of love. "Hello, Auntie." Shi greeted Luo Xian obediently. Suddenly, the little girl who was looking at Luo Xian seemed to think of something. She turned her head and whispered in her father's ear. "Haha, Sister Luo Xian, just now Shi said that she remembered watching your program and asked me if you were the auntie on TV." Yang Yi was happy and turned to Luo Xian. "Oh." Shi blushed embarrassedly and buried her face in her father's chest. How did her father say her secret? The little girl was worried that she recognized the wrong person. If she did, wouldn't she be embarrassed? Yes. "Oh, what a cute little Shi. Come, let Auntie hug you." The more Luo Xian looked at Shi, the more she liked her. However, Luo Xian was still a little too thin. Yang Yi asked her to hug Shi for a while, but Luo Xian couldn't hold it for a while and held Shi's little hand instead. The two stood together and Luo Xian talked to Shi intimately. She even smiled and took Shi shopping. Chapter 660. Yang Yi and Cici took the high-speed train home the next morning because they had to treat Luo Xian and Deputy Director Cui to dinner that night. Things went quite smoothly, and Cui Jilin would help to persuade them. They believed that with benefits and favors, it wouldn't be a big problem for the Limit Challenge to get this time slot. The rest would be left to Yun Yongfeng to follow up. Yang Yi was rushing home to take care of his wife and child. However, there were still some twists and turns. On the night when Yang Yi returned home, he was sitting in the living room watching Soldiers Assault with Yang Chongguei. The old man was very interested in this TV series. Suddenly, Mo Xiaowan sent him a few reports and an interview video. It was not convenient for Yang Yi to disturb Yang Chongguei regarding work matters, so he took his phone to the side hall to watch. Xingyao Productions had suddenly launched an attack. They had complained to the media that Zhongxing Productions was under the control of the law and had made a show similar to their High Ability Challenge. The name of the show had even been exposed. It was called the Limit Challenge. The similarity of the names was a strong support for their argument. Meanwhile, some other tabloid media had also found out that Yang Yi was the one behind the production of China Star. This program was created after Yang Yi sold High Energy Challenge. Obviously, Xingyao Productions had used the gossip media to smear Yang Yi's name. They could not directly accuse Yang Yi because they would be sued for slander and defamation by Yang Yi. However, these revelations and catfights had become the hot topic of discussion on the news media and social networks. Yang Yi was not doing original works but plagiarizing? Although the media outlets that broke the news did not directly say so, their words expressed the same concept. The Limit Challenge and High Ability Challenge had such similar names. Moreover, High Ability Challenge was very famous. It was obvious who was plagiarizing who. The interview video was recorded when Li Man attended the event. It was a clip of her interview with the media. The production company will handle the copyright of the show. I don't know much about it. In the video, Li Man was gracious and generous. Her mouth was also speaking diplomatic words, as if she wanted to put herself in a position where she wouldn't offend either side. But High Energy Challenge is indeed a very outstanding program. This Saturday night at 8 p.m., we will be meeting everyone at Xiongnan TV station. I will also appear in front of everyone as a celebrity host. I hope everyone will come and watch. Li Man smiled like a flower and said, "It's normal for a good program to be easily imitated by others. It's just that I feel a bit regretful. After all, people aren't omnipotent. Yang Yi is a very good songwriter. I admire his achievements in music. In the past, I even asked him for a song. It's a pity that he doesn't want to develop his career in music and produce more classic works. He's half-hearted. One moment he's busy writing a book, the next he's busy doing this and that. He's even distracted by trying to produce results on variety shows. That's obviously impossible." Although Li Man's voice was very gentle and her tone was very peaceful when she answered the reporter's questions, Yang Yi felt that it was very harsh. "Who's this person?" Yang Yi frowned. Hearing the woman's voice, he asked Murphy, who came over to investigate. "She said that she asked me for a song? Why don't I have any impression of it?" This was also because Yang Yi was somewhat indifferent to the entertainment industry. Li Man was also an outstanding A-list celebrity. Yang Yi actually treated her as a nobody and had long forgotten about her. Murphy couldn't help but laugh and said, "Have you forgotten? At that time, I said that someone asked me for your contact information and wanted to ask you for a song. I was pestered and had no choice but to give her your email. Oh, I remember now. She went on the program, Fast Music with you, right?" When Murphy said this, Yang Yi found the corresponding memory and said with a smile, "At that time, I asked her to send her song to me, but her singing was really bad. Her voice was very sweet, but there was no matching singing skill." When Murphy heard Yang Yi say that Li Man's voice was very sweet, her mouth twitched slightly. She said with some jealousy, "Well, but don't provoke her. This woman's scandal is everywhere. I think there's a problem. She's not a good woman." In the past, she didn't feel anything because Mu Xiang was still Mu Xiang. Now, Mu Xiang was Yang Yi, her husband. Of course, Murphy had to be wary of those flirtatious sluts. When Yang Yi heard Murphy say this, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he smiled and pinched Murphy's face intimately and said, "Little vinegar jar, I don't even know her. How can I provoke her? What's more, this heart of mine is already attached to you and the child. No one can take it away from me." Murphy's heart was filled with sweetness, but she still said stubbornly, "Who said that I'm jealous? I'm just afraid that you'll be taken advantage of." Starlight Productions' attack seemed to have been timed well. It was suddenly exposed during the crucial moment of Yun Yang's discussion with Magic City television station, as if someone had tipped them off. However, it was really a coincidence this time. Starlight Productions had chosen this time to hype up this news, of course, to promote the upcoming broadcast of High Ability Challenge. It would be best if they could have a war of words with the people from Zhongxing Productions. The livelier it was, the more advantageous it would be for them. However, out of everyone's expectations, the people from Zhongxing Productions did not give any response. Even when the reporters went to Mo Xiaowan and Phoebe Studio, no one commented on this matter. This was very strange. Starlight Productions made a fuss for a while, feeling extremely awkward. It was as if they had completely fabricated an imaginary enemy and were singing a one-man show by themselves. They criticized Zhongxing Productions verbally and in writing, humming, "I'll turn a blind eye to your performance," and calmly doing what they were supposed to do. This mysterious attitude made Hu Shang, Li Manman, Luo Jinting, and the rest feel slightly uneasy. It was as if a storm was coming. The world was covered by dark clouds. The oppressive atmosphere was brewing an explosion that could split heaven and earth. They did not guess wrongly. Zhongxing Productions was waiting for the opportunity to explode. Other than Yang Yi, who was dealing with the people from Magic City Television Station, Yen Tao and Ran Min were not idle either. They discussed with their subordinates for a long time and finally came up with a list of celebrity host candidates for Yang Yi. Jie Yuchen, Ma Jianwei, Sun Jinyue, Dan Hongkue, Yuan Yen. "Who are these people?" asked Yang Yi. Yen Tao and Ren Min looked at Yang Yi strangely. They were also very depressed. These were all celebrities in the entertainment industry. Those who watched TV and movies often knew, yet Yang Yi still asked who they were. Of course, they could not expose their boss's scars, so they explained to Yang Yi helplessly. Jie Yuchen is an actor, a very famous TV drama actor. He acted in director Chan Fengchen's The Capital City and last year's Great Chu's Palace, as well as other popular TV dramas. Ma Jianwei and Jie Yuchen are the same. They have acted in many TV dramas. Relatively speaking, Ma Jianwei has acted in more TV dramas because he doesn't pick the main or supporting roles. Jie Yuchen only acts as the main lead. Sun Jinyue is a movie actor. He has won the Best Actor award and has acted in. Dan Hongkue is also an actor. However, compared to Teacher Sun, his roles are more down-to-earth. Because of his ordinary looks, he can't act in those roles that require more of an image. However, under Teacher Sun's performance, many small roles at the bottom of society have left a deep impression on the audience. Yuan Yen is a teacher at Shanghai Drama Academy. However, he also acts in some TV dramas and some variety shows. His EQ and IQ are very high. This is the unanimous evaluation of the industry. When talking about Yuan Yen, Ran Min couldn't help but add, "He is a little similar to you, Yang Yi." They are both very good at cooking and are famous for being good men who love their wives and children. Why were these people a little similar to the hosts of The Limit Challenge in Yang Yi's previous life? It was because Yen Tao and Ran Min had followed Yang Yi's template and filled in the gaps by themselves. In the end, they had been selected from so many celebrities. Yang Yi pondered for a long time before saying, "We definitely want Yuan Yen. As for the others, I'm not familiar with them, so I can't choose. Let's do it this way. You guys make an order based on their EQ. If we want to film our show well, we have to invite people who are eloquent, good at handling complicated interpersonal relationships, and emergency situations to control the scene. Therefore, we can start from those with high EQ and invite them one by one." In the end, Yang Yi smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Our show isn't very famous now. These are all big-name celebrities. Even if we give them money, they might not be willing to come. Therefore, go ahead and try." Chapter 661. As the Spring Festival approached, the coffee shop at the corner of the street was closed for the holidays. Ding Xiang and the two new part-time students went home for the Spring Festival. Yang Yi had planned to bring his family back to his hometown a week or two earlier. However, since Yang Huan was still filming in the Jiangnan military region, he couldn't leave her alone in Zhongqing. Hence, the plan was scrapped. Xiuqin didn't have many scenes, but the crew wouldn't adjust the schedule for Yang Huan, so the scenes would be shot one by one. She would probably have to shoot until the 28th or 29th of the lunar calendar. Of course, Yang Yi had other considerations when he decided to wait for Yang Huan to go home later. Little Momo was infected with rotavirus a few days ago and had diarrhea and fever. Although according to the doctor's instructions, the little guy drank some oral rehydration fluids and Mo Fei continued to feed him. His condition gradually improved, but the little guy was still very weak. Yang Yi wanted to wait until little Momo recovered a little before taking him back to his hometown. Tong Tong needed a healthy body to cope with the long journey and the rural environment. Early in the morning, Yang Yi got up and ran to the market to buy groceries. At the gate, the guard stopped him. "Mr. Yang, there's a letter for your family." Yang Yi took it and saw the English address on the envelope. Yang Yi had already guessed that it was from David's family. However, when he looked at the signature, he saw that it was from Lu Weisha. He looked at the recipient again. It wasn't him, but she. Lu Weisha had gone to Australia for a trip. Yang Yi had heard about it from she. However, he didn't expect that the two girls would contact each other in such an ancient way. It was quite interesting. Yang Yi didn't open his daughter's letter. Instead, he put it in his pocket and continued running to the market. "Little Yang, you're here?" The aunties, uncles, brothers, and sisters who sold groceries were very familiar with Yang Yi. It was strange for a man like Yang Yi to get up early to buy groceries. Later, they found out that he was a celebrity. Naturally, Yang Yi became a celebrity in the market. When they saw him arrive, they all greeted him with a smile. "Little Yang, do you want a pigtail? Today, I killed more than 10 pigs and brought back their tails. You came early, so quickly pick a few and cook them for your children." Brother Wan, who was selling pork, also greeted Yang Yi enthusiastically. "Little kids love to eat pig's tail the most. You won't get sick of it no matter how much you eat it." This pork stall sold local pigs from the countryside. The pork was very fresh, the meat was tight and elastic. It was fat and white, and the meat was red and shiny. It was much more delicious than other stalls. Of course, it was also more expensive than other stalls. Yang Yi picked up a pig's tail and looked at it with interest. It was a short length, but the skin was delicate and there was a hint of red in the white. Obviously, it tasted good when cooked. This can be used to make soup. Yang Yi thought of a dish that tasted good. "Big Brother Wan, help me cut off this fat part." Yang Yi gestured at the fat behind the pig's tail and said, "Hey, little Yang, how can you do business like this?" Brother Wan chuckled. Yang Yi ignored him and picked up 3 pigs' tails and threw them on his scale. He smiled and said, "Same old rules. After you weigh it, you calculate the money. Then cut off what needs to be cut off. As for the cut off, you can do whatever you want with it, okay?" Yang Yi didn't care about that little bit of money, he just wanted the valuable part. "Okay. Little Yang, you are generous enough." Brother Wan gave him a big thumbs up and threw the pig's tail on the chopping board. He started cutting it for Yang Yi. The bed in winter was warm and the best for sleeping in. This was not only for adults, but also for children. During the holidays, there was no need to wake up early to go to kindergarten. She was even harder to wake up in the morning. Yang Yi started a new round of battle. She, wake up." Yang Yi called out softly from the bedside, but it did not have any effect. The little girl's eyes were still closed and she was sleeping soundly. "Little lazy pig, quickly wake up. Mommy and brother are already up." Mommy woke up early to practice singing. "How can you still sleep in?" Yang Yi changed his strategy. He sat on the edge of the bed and shook Shishi's shoulder through the quilt. This shaking made the half-asleep Shishi unable to sleep. The little girl squinted her sleepy eyes and looked at her father. Her nose made a long sound like a little pig. Don't think that this was the prelude to her waking up. The little girl closed her eyes for a while, then her eyelids drooped again. If her father did not wake her up, Shishi would definitely go back to sleep. "Get up. Otherwise, Daddy will carry you up and wash your face with very, very cold water." Yang Yi pinched the little girl's nose at the right time, and the corners of his mouth curved into a smile. "I don't want to." Sisi was actually already somewhat awake, but she was still lazing around in bed, so she unwillingly pouted her little mouth, turned her head, and turned to the other side. She also pulled the blanket away, revealing some of her back. She curled up like a worm, still wrapped in the quilt to cover her head. It looked as though she was unwilling to get up no matter what her father did. Luckily, Yang Yi had a trump card today. Daddy told you that I received a letter from Lu Weisha today. Yang Yi pressed down on the little girl's quilt and body. His mouth was blocked by the quilt as he spoke to the little girl who was wrapped in it. Ah! What did Lu Weisha send me? She finally could not stay in bed. Her little head popped out of the quilt, revealing a pair of big eyes that were not fully opened but were already full of energy. She sent you a letter. Yang Yi smiled as he waved the letter in his hand at his daughter. What's a letter? She was a little confused. This old thing was too unfamiliar to the little girl. A letter is the same as a phone call. But it's what you want to say to someone. Write it on a piece of paper and send it through the post office. When you reach the other party's city, they will be able to see the contents and know what you want to say to them. Yang Yi smiled. Do you want to know what Lu Weisha said to you in the letter? Yes. The little girl nodded vigorously, her big eyes filled with anticipation. Then hurry up and get up, wash your face and brush your teeth. Then you can open it with your own hands and see what Lu Weisha wrote in it, Yang Yi said gently. After several months of reading before bed, she had already understood the meaning of some Chinese characters. She could even understand some English words. She. Of course, she could not read by herself. Yang Yi would read the letter with her and help her read the words that she did not understand. She was no longer sleepy. The little girl, full of anticipation, struggled to get up, but her father was still lying on top of her through the quilt. Papa, you're so heavy. I can't get up. She's giggles sounded in the bedroom. Chapter 662. When there were no telephones, everyone wrote letters. Your father used to write letters when he first joined the army, but he didn't write much. Besides, the postman only came to the village once every half a month. Our place is far from the county. During breakfast, Dong Yuera smiled and talked about the past. I can't read, so I asked Huan to read. Grandma's story was very interesting. However, she, who was eating breakfast, did not pay attention to her grandma. From time to time, the little girl's eyes drifted to the letter that her father put aside. She was expectant, curious, happy, and even a little impatient. Finally, after breakfast, she could read Lu Weisha's letter. She wanted to open the letter herself, and so did Yang Yi. Therefore, he sat next to his daughter and taught her how to open the letter. However, it was not an easy task. After she tore a small hole in the envelope with her little hand, she panicked and felt as if she had destroyed the letter. She quickly stuffed it back into her father's hand. What's wrong? You did well. Continue. Yang Yi smiled. The little girl pouted her little mouth and shrank her little hand behind her back. She was unwilling to take the letter and said anxiously, Papa, help me. Help me. Yang Yi gently tore the envelope and helped his daughter open it. Taking out the contents, to Yang Yi's surprise, Lu Weisha's letter was not a letter full of words, but a few hard cards. Among them, 3 were photos and 1 was a postcard. There were a few lines of English on the postcard. The handwriting was beautiful and smooth, and it did not look like it was written by a child. It should be written by Lu Weisha's mother. Looking at the photos first, Yang Yi handed them to Shi, who had been waiting eagerly. Murphy also curiously poked her head over. Now that Tong Tong was in her grandfather's arms, she did not need to accompany her son 24/7. 2 of the 3 photos were taken with the sea as the background, and 1 was a close-up. Lu Weisha was swimming in the sea with her mother. She was wearing diving goggles, a breathing tube, and a swimming ring. Lu Weisha was fully equipped and looked very interesting. The other photo was a distant view. Lu Weisha and a few white boys were building a crooked castle on the beach. Behind them, the white beach and the beautiful blue sea intersected. It was beautiful like a dream. The photos should be taken by David. This guy was actually quite good at taking photos. Yang Yi, who had learned a lot of photography skills for his daughter, could see that the composition and light adjustment of the photos were extraordinary. These photos were taken with a Polaroid without any post-editing. It could directly reflect the photographer's ability. Of course, this was only Yang Yi's feeling. She paid more attention to the content. Wow, Lu Weisha went swimming, the little girl said enviously. However, she soon felt that something was wrong. She raised her head and asked, Papa, the weather is so cold. Isn't Lu Weisha cold? She looked at Lu Weisha's one-piece swimsuit. It was thin, revealing her arms and long legs. Thinking about the whistling cold wind outside, the little girl couldn't help but shiver. Before Yang Yi could speak, Murphy, who was also watching with interest, smiled and said, No, Lu Weisha is now in Australia. The climate there is the opposite of ours. When we are in winter, they are in summer. When we are in summer, they are in winter. So now we feel that the weather is very cold. But over at Lu Weisha's place, the weather is very hot. So that's how it is. The little girl looked at her mother as if she understood, and her eyes gradually became admiring. Mom, you are so amazing. You know so much. Yang Yi wanted to tell his daughter that this was all common sense. However, when he thought about it, how could she know so much common sense? But he could consider letting the little girl start to slowly learn some scientific knowledge. Now that Yang Yi had been dealing with a lot of things, his mind had become more active. After pondering over the idea of letting Cici understand science, Yang Yi thought of the children's book author support fund that he had already prepared and was only waiting to announce to everyone after the new year. In addition to fairy tales, he could increase the scope of support for popular science books. There were always some parents who were science students. They understood the principles of science and also knew how to explain it to their children. Only then could they explain it in simple terms and make it fascinating. If he let them create interesting popular science books for their children, it would be easier for the children to accept them. Thinking a little too far, Yang Yi came back to his senses. She was looking at the third photo. The third photo was interesting. Lu Weisha was in a zoo in Australia. Separated by a cage, she was taking a photo with a big kangaroo with a big chest. Mom, I know what this is. This is a kangaroo. She said happily to Murphy. Yang Yi and she had read the animal picture book that the little girl wanted to buy. There were cartoon pictures of kangaroos in it. The little girl had a deep impression of this animal because her father told her that kangaroos had pockets on their stomachs where they could carry their babies. This was the same as how Murphy sometimes used a baby carrier to carry Tong Tong. Young babies could also use a baby carrier, but it was in a reclining position. But this kangaroo doesn't have a pocket on its stomach. She hesitated again and wondered if her judgment was wrong. Only the mother kangaroo has a pocket. This should be the father kangaroo. The father kangaroo doesn't have a pocket. Yang Yi explained to she. Is that so? The little girl said with some regret. She wanted to see what the baby kangaroo looked like in the mother kangaroo's pocket. However, when she saw the kangaroo, she was still very happy. The little girl happily ran to find her grandfather and grandmother to let them see the kangaroo. Why does this animal look so scary? It looks like a human. Dong Yue had never seen or heard of it before. She said with some surprise and disdain. Let me see. What's so scary about it? In the past, when the tigers in the mountains saw this guy who only knows how to put on airs, they would definitely bite him. Yang Chonggue said indifferently after seeing it. The little girl suddenly lost interest. She pouted her little mouth and said unhappily, Don't eat kangaroos. Kangaroos are very cute. Lu Weisha also sent a postcard. Come and take a look. Yang Yi held a postcard with the background of the Great Barrier Reef and said to she. Okay. The little girl was happy again when she saw her father. She excitedly jumped into her father's arms. Fortunately, Yang Yi's strength was great and he caught the heavy little guy. She knew a few words, but when they were strung together, the little girl couldn't understand. Lu Weisha said, I had a lot of fun in Australia. We ate lobsters. The seaside is very interesting. I really hope you can come to Australia to play. Yang Yi helped his daughter read it and then translated. She had eaten lobsters before. When Yang Yi and Murphy were together on their first anniversary, he took her to eat lobsters in a big hotel. The little girl didn't have any special reaction to this. Papa, I also want to go to Australia to play. I want to play with Lu Weisha, and then I can see Mother Kangaroo and Baby Kangaroo. The little girl looked at several photos and postcards over and over again, and said somewhat gloomily, "Then let's wait until April and then go, okay?" Yang Yi said softly to his daughter, "In April, Papa and Mama will be free. Our family will go to Australia to play for a few days and then come back. When you are on vacation, we will go to Grandpa and Grandma's house together." "Well, okay." The little girl got her father's promise and immediately became happy. Chapter 663. Originally, Yang Yi wanted Shi to write a reply to Lu Weisha. However, thinking that Lu Weisha was traveling with her parents outside and had no fixed residence, it was useless to write a reply, so he could only give up. "What are you going to do with the rest of the letter?" Yang Yi looked at his daughter and carefully put the photo and postcard into the album that he had bought for her. It was a girl's little collection. He smiled and asked, "Do you want to cut the stamps? Daddy will buy you another stamp album to keep?" However, she turned her little head and said seriously, "No, you can't cut it. You have to keep it." It seemed that the little girl was not interested in collecting stamps and those colorful little pieces of paper. After all, there were abundant living materials now, and she had more fun and beautiful toys. However, she could not bear to throw away the envelope, so she stuffed the whole envelope into a new page of the album. Of course, it seemed that the envelope was a little long and could not be stuffed directly. The little girl deftly took out the envelope, folded it, and put it back. She then smiled with satisfaction. In Yang Yi's opinion, Shi's organizing ability was not good enough. After stuffing the envelope, it was bulging. After closing the album, it was like sticking out her butt. Part of it was bulging, and it was not beautiful. However, he did not want to interfere with she doing things that she could do by herself. Sometimes, it might be more effective to let her do it herself and think of a way than to do it best under the guidance of an adult. In the afternoon, Yang Yi started to cook the pigtail stew with peanut soup. Dong Yue frowned at first and said, "Tizi, you can give this to adults. Don't give it to little Yang Shi. Children will shake their heads and become stupid if they eat the pigtail. Mom, don't believe in something that has no scientific basis." Yang Yi said with a smile, "In all these years, have you ever seen a child shake their head and become stupid?" Who said no? In the west of the village, the silly child of the second Lu family, isn't he stupid? That child is 1 year older than you, Dong Yue said. Yes, but he was born stupid. How could he become stupid from eating a pig's tail? Besides, Grandpa Lu's family is so poor that they can't even fill their stomachs. You even asked me to send some sweet potatoes to their family in the past. How could they have the money to eat pig's tails? You can't even afford pork. Yang Yi said. Coincidentally, Yang Yi was strolling into the side hall with his hands behind his back. He heard Yang Yi and Dong Yue talking about the pig's tail in the kitchen, so he came over to take a look. You're not stupid after eating a pig's tail. Pigtails, pig ears, and pig tongues are the most delicious parts of a pig. Yang Chongguei stared at him and said, "When I was young, I went to Guangdong province to make a living. Their peanut braised pig's tail, TSK. I can eat 7 bowls of rice in a row with that taste. But you can't give it to children." Dong Yue was a little shaken, but some words that had been passed down by word of mouth were still rooted in her heart. Where did this nonsense come from? Those children in Guangdong province eat pig's tail since they were young. No, only the young masters of rich families have the fortune to eat pig's tail. If they can't eat it, then why would these noble young masters like to eat it so much? Yang Chongguei snorted and argued with his wife. Dong Yue trusted Yang Chongguei's knowledge more. After a while, she didn't insist on her old opinion. Moreover, Dong Yue was convinced by her husband and son. However, Yang Chong-gue might be disappointed. Yang-e didn't plan to make peanut braised pig's tail today. Instead, he used these two things to make soup. Peanut braised pig's tail needed to be fried in oil in advance. At the end, it also needed to be cooked with strong seasoning until the pig's tail was soft and tender. Then, the sauce could be removed from the pot. This kind of dish was quite tasty, but of course, it was also slightly oily. In contrast, the pig's tail and peanut braised soup were equally soft and tasty, but the taste was much lighter, which was suitable for Murphy's current taste. During lunch, Yang-e first scooped a bowl of soup for Shi. There were some peanuts and a section of pig's tail in it. Shi liked to eat peanuts very much, but this was the first time she had seen pig's tail at the dining table. The little girl happily scooped up a peanut with a small spoon and stuffed it into her mouth. As she ate the soft peanuts, she curiously fiddled with the small section of pig's tail and asked, "Papa, what is this?" "Pig's tail, it's delicious." Yang Chong-gue answered for Yang-e, who was still busy. "Little Yang-shi, look at Grandpa eating like this." The old man finished the soup in the bowl first, and then he moved his hands very roughly. He pinched the bone of the pig's tail from front to back, grabbed it, and dipped it in the soy sauce. Before the soy sauce slid down, he moved his big mouth forward and took a big bite. "Oh, delicious. It's very delicious." Yang Chong-gue smiled and gave a thumbs up. Was it really that delicious? The pig's tail was delicious, but it wasn't necessarily so exaggerated. Yang Chong-gue was just teasing his granddaughter. Shi also reached into her bowl and fished out the pig's tail. She didn't mind that her fingers were stuck in the soup. The little girl dipped it in the soy sauce and took a bite, just like her grandfather. The cooked pig's tail couldn't even withstand the bite, and Shi directly bit off a large piece of the skin and the tender meat on the back. The taste was the taste of soy sauce, mixed with the pig's tail and peanuts, and the strong fragrance of the stew. But more importantly, it was the taste. It was just like the pig's trotters that Shi used to eat. The skin was like gelatinous, and the pork was originally very fresh and tender. When she chewed carefully, she found that it was a little sticky to her teeth. This feeling was simply the best enjoyment. "Is it delicious?" Yang-e helped his mother carry the dishes to the dining table and asked Shi, who was eating heartily with a smile. The little girl was like a puppy, gnawing on the meat near the bone in the middle. She loved it so much that she couldn't put it down. Her big eyes were smiling as she looked at her father. She nodded happily and said, "Delicious, super delicious." In contrast, Murphy preferred soup. This beautiful, rich, and light soup was very tasty. Murphy felt that it was more delicious than the slightly plump pig's tail. High Energy Challenge was broadcast in the middle of January. This originally very attractive outdoor reality show with competitive attributes still showed great potential after it was broadcast on Xiongnan TV station. The original audience came because of its reputation, and Xiongnan TV station itself was a very good platform. Its variety shows had always done well. High Energy Challenge also made use of this platform to earn a lot of viewership ratings. We are honored to announce to everyone that the premier viewership ratings of High Energy Challenge is as high as 1.7%. Luo Jinting said in high spirits at the press conference the next day. This has already broken through the previous best results of High Energy Challenge. Later on, when the reporter asked Hu Shang, who had his limelight stolen, was a little unhappy. He could only force a smile and said to the reporter, "We will continue to work hard in the future and strive to make another breakthrough." It had to be said that Li Man was indeed a good attraction in High Energy Challenge. This woman knew how to make use of her advantages. She was beautiful and sexy in front of the camera. Not only could she arouse the passion of the challengers, but she could also capture the attention of the audience. What's the point of watching the challenge? Just watch the competition. When High Energy Challenge stood out in the field of variety shows, in fact, the mainstream media didn't pay attention to its so-called breakthrough in history. Instead, they were fighting to report that the viewership ratings of Soldier's Assault had broken the viewership ratings record of Central TV's TV series. Soldier's Assault was no longer just a TV series. The audience treated it as a kind of emotion and treated it as their own child. They wanted to see how that silly child, Su Sanduo, would break through himself step by step and grow into a good soldier step by step. Not only did they watch it themselves, but they also pulled their relatives and friends to watch it together. Naturally, the viewership ratings of this TV series also rose. This time, the record was broken because of the 13th episode. Cheng Kai left Gang Chilian and Quan Lian was shocked. Even the most gentle and tolerant Shi Jin couldn't help but splash wine on Cheng Kai's face. Then, Shi Jin was reinstated. Su Sand was wailing, Gao Cheng's words, and Quan Lian's cheers pushed the plot to a climax. The next day, there were still reporters interviewing passers-by on the streets. A few of them said that they cried after watching this episode. There were even hot-blooded youngsters who said that after watching this episode, they really wanted to join the army. They wanted to be a soldier like Su Sanduo and be a good squad leader like Shi Jin. Yang Yi didn't know if High Energy Challenge could still break through itself, but he felt that Soldier's Assault could possibly produce better results in this life. After all, the premiere of Soldier's Assault was on Central TV and not a local channel that few people watched. Chapter 664. Everyone was busy celebrating the Lunar New Year, but the production team of the Limit Challenge was destined not to leave their posts this Lunar New Year. Yoon Young-fong had already reached an agreement with Magic City TV station that the first episode of the Limit Challenge would be broadcasted on the 26th of February. Before that, the first episode of the show had to be broadcasted internally in the station and shown to the invited sponsors at the same time to strive for more sponsorship fees. Therefore, they had to start filming and producing the first episode of the show at least after they returned from the Lunar New Year, which was the beginning of February. The time left for the production team was already very tight. Even during such an important holiday like the Lunar New Year, they could only apologize to their families. Yen Tao and Ran Lien went their separate ways. Yen Tao continued to recruit talents for the production team according to Yang Yi's request, recruiting talents for subtitles and music that were not available before. At the same time, he was preparing the shooting location, personnel, and resources for the first episode of the show. Ran Lien and Ran Lien went to invite the remaining 3 celebrity actors. The first to be invited was Yuan Yen. Coincidentally, he lived in Magic City. Through the introduction of people in the industry, Ran Lien and Yoon Young-fong rushed to Yuan Yan's house. Unexpectedly, Yuan Yen, who was addressed as Teacher Yuan by many young actors, did not put on any airs. He chatted with Yoon Young-fong and Yoon Young-fong happily, but his eyes that were squinted into slits when he smiled were shining with the light of wisdom. The wisdom here did not refer to how knowledgeable Yuan Yen was or how many profound phrases and allusions he used in his conversation. It was referring to the wisdom of life, as if he could see through people's hearts. Yuan Yen did not have the habit of speaking in a gentle manner. Of course, his voice was soothing. Sitting opposite him, Ran Lien and Yoon Young-fong still felt that they were on equal footing despite the significant difference in status. However, Yuan Yen was able to hit the nail on the head with every word he spoke. His words were sharp and incisive, raising the spirits of others and not daring to underestimate him. It was no wonder that he was a teacher, an actor, and a director. Yuan Yen had directed his own movie before. Although this was not rare, many actors had been directors before. I remember that some time ago, on the 10th, Xiongnan TV station's High Ability Challenge even said that the Limit Challenge is suspected of plagiarizing their show. Yuan Yen said with a smile after listening to Yoon Young-fong and Ran Ming's intentions. However, before Yoon Young could explain himself, Yuan Yen waved his hand and said with a smile, "I didn't really believe this report back then." With the copyright organization keeping an eye on it, you shouldn't have copied the High Ability Challenge's model and thought that this might be a publicity stunt from Starlight. And today, with your arrival, I can basically confirm that your Limit Challenge is different from the High Energy Challenge. Why did he say that? Because the Limit Challenge had invited Yuan Yen to be their celebrity host. If it was something like the High Energy Challenge, would there be a need to invite Yuan Yen? Wasn't this like using a butcher's knife to kill a pig? When Yuan Yen spoke, he also showed a kind of pride that came from his bones. However, it was not arrogance, but a confidence that was easier to accept. It is indeed different. Our boss, Mr. Yang Yi, has provided a very good idea for the program. Teacher Yuan, you can take a look at our proposal. Yun Yongfeng passed the proposal over. Yang Yi is also a genius in the entertainment industry. However, he's also a maverick who doesn't appear in front of the media's cameras. If it was someone else, they would have been drowned in the endless stream of newcomers. However, Yang Yi has really done it. He's a role model for our generation. Yuan Yen said to Yun Yongfeng with a smile that sounded like he was teasing and envious. It could be heard that Yuan Yen appreciated Yang Yi. After all, they were both representatives of good men. He also often sent photos of himself cooking to his family on his micro-broadcasting. Yuan Yen flipped through the proposal roughly. The model and gameplay of the Limit Challenge formed a rough idea in his mind. However, the compliment that Yun Yongfeng was expecting did not appear. Yuan Yen had a friendly smile on his face, making it hard to tell what he was thinking. Closing the proposal, his first sentence was, "I'm guessing that even though Yang Yi suggested this show, he wouldn't take on the role of a celebrity host, right?" Teacher Yuan, you're right. Yun Yongfeng hesitated. He did not know what Yuan Yen meant, so he could only add, "However, according to our plan, Yang Yi will appear as a guest in the second or third episode as well because he has a movie to promote. Then we'll have to invite Su Sanduo as well," Yuan Yen said with a smile. He actually remembered Yang Yi's movie that had been briefly introduced in the newspaper. The other main character in the movie was Geng Sha, who was also the actor of Su Sanduo, who was currently popular all over the country. Yun Yongfeng's eyes shone. He was not stupid, of course. He could hear the intention in Yuan Yan's words. "Teacher Yuan, do you mean that you agree?" Yun Yongfeng asked. "I think that the creativity of your program is very good. It's very interesting. However, I still have some questions for Director Ren. Do you think that the most important thing in this program is the script's plot, dialogue, or the hosts and guests' free play?" Yuan Yen asked straightforwardly. Ren Min shook his head without hesitation and said, "We won't design lines for all the hosts and guests. This is a reality show. What we can do is to set up a general framework and design the rules of the game. As for who wins and who loses, it's up to all of you to fight for it. Besides, how the hosts and guests usually speak should be how they communicate under the camera. We're going for the greatest sense of realism." Of course, the proposal in Yuan Yan's hands did not have a specific plot. After all, the program still had to be recorded in the future. If he knew what they were going to play, it would not be fun during the recording. Yuan Yen was satisfied with Ran Min's answer. He continued to ask a few more questions and finally asked, "There's one last question that you don't have to answer if it's not convenient for you. I'd like to know, other than me, who else are the 6 celebrity hosts?" Yuan Yen wanted to know the answer to this question because he knew that the success of a show was not only a matter of creativity, but also a matter of people. If he had to work with someone who was not suitable, he could endure his own feelings. However, the quality of the show would be greatly reduced, and that was not something he wanted to see. Ran Min and Yun Yongfeng looked at each other and hesitated. In the end, Yun Yongfeng chose his words carefully and said, "We've decided on 3 hosts in the beginning. They're all relatively young and energetic young artists. You should know one of them, the young singer Zhu Jie who sang Impulsive Punishment." "Zhu Jie's not bad." Yuan Yen smiled as usual and said, "He's driven to do variety shows. He's also a hot topic. There's another one called Guazi. You might not be familiar with him, but he's now acting as the main character in Badaling Film Company's Fat Secret Agent," said Yun Yongfeng. Guazi. Guazi. The name sounds familiar. I remember now. Didn't he act in Fairy Tale last year, the micro-movie? Yuan Yen was struck with realization. As an epic-making film, Fairy Tale was the first micro-movie in history. Naturally, it became a case study for Yuan Yen and his students in class. Guazi. I'm not familiar with this person, but his acting skills are solid. He's quite a talented child. Yuan Yen nodded in the end, but there was a hint of hesitation in his voice. The other one is Yang Huan, one of the female leads of Drawing Sword, which is still being filmed. She's the actress who plays Xiuqin. Yun Yongfeng's introduction to Yang Huan was a little brief. How is she related to Yang Yi? Yuan Yen asked sharply. She's his biological sister, but there's another consideration for choosing her. Yun Yongfeng quickly said, this girl is more honest and has been practicing martial arts since she was young. Her skills are extraordinary. Although she's a girl, she doesn't need the care of a male host at all. Guazi could be considered as Yang Yi's own man. Now, there was another biological sister, Yang Huan. Could they play well with such a lineup of partners? Yuan Yen frowned. Chapter 665. In Yang Yi's previous life, there was a public service advertisement on the internet called Using Wisdom to See the Invisible Things. It was about a vegetable market's lady boss who was collecting rent when it was uploaded onto the internet. Netizens grabbed onto the video clip to show the lady boss's inhumane side and criticized it. They tried to use language to scold the lady boss to death and tried to persuade the people nearby not to go to the market to buy vegetables. However, these netizens did not know that the lady boss's harsh words were just her habitual mouth. In fact, she was kind on the surface and had helped many people. The camera captured her collecting rent fiercely, but it did not capture her collecting rent. If she collected too much money, she would not be greedy, but return it to the stall owner who was running a small business. The camera captured her smashing someone else's scale, but it did not capture her smashing the scale that was short. It did not capture her asking the stall owner to buy a good scale in exasperation, nor did it capture her persuading others to run their business with integrity. There were many things that the camera could not capture, such as her asking the deaf and mute to sell vegetables at her own market instead of drifting aimlessly outside. In spite of this, the netizens dared not come to the market due to the online violence. Although the video ended abruptly, it was expected that the situation would only worsen. In this world, most people like to judge people and things on the surface, or they like to take things out of context and go with the flow. However, Yuan Yen was not such a person. Among the 3 people chosen by the program, Yuan Yen was only satisfied with Zhu Jie. He did not know enough about Guazi and Yang Huan, especially Yang Huan. After knowing that Yang Huan was Yang Yi's younger sister, Yuan Yen was vaguely displeased. How could a show with potential involve so much nepotism? Was this not self-destruction? However, Yuan Yen did not make a conclusion immediately. Instead, he asked Yun Yongfeng and Ran Min to wait while he went to another room and searched for Shan Wani's phone number. Shan Wani was slightly older than Yuan Yen. However, Yuan Yen and Shan Wani both graduated from the Shanghai Drama Academy. Shan Wani could be considered as Yuan Yan's senior, so the two of them had a close relationship. Yuan Yen called Shan Wani. Coincidentally, although Shan Wani was filming, he was filming someone else's scene. He sat by the side and waited. The assistant passed the phone to Shan Wani. Through the conversation with Shan Wani, Yuan Yen roughly knew what kind of person Yang Huan, who played Li Yunlong's wife, was. Capable, hard-working, efficient, emotional. Yuan Yen looked at the paper and noted down some of the key words that Shan Wani mentioned about Yang Huan. He muttered, of course, the most important thing is that she has real kung fu. The martial artists in the crew can't beat Yang Huan. When Shan Wani was talking about Yang Huan, his tone was full of admiration. He admired Yang Huan's fighting skills. In the entertainment industry, there were not many actresses who could fight. In that case, even if Yang Huan was a backdoor entrant, he seemed to have a pretty good persona. Yuan Yen did not let Yun Yongfeng and the rest wait for too long. He came back with a plate of cut fruits and asked Yun Yongfeng and Ran Mang to eat while smiling. Where are the other 2? Who do you have in mind? We haven't had the time to contact the other 2 teachers. Our initial choice is teacher Dan Hongkue and teacher Ma Jianwei. Yun Yongfeng was relieved to see that Yuan Yen was still chatting casually when he came back. Old Dan and old Ma are not bad, especially old Dan. He's been through hard times. Let me tell you, he has a rich life experience, so he can act like whatever he wants to act in. He can tell you a thing or two about anything when you talk to him. With him around, there's no need to be afraid of awkward silence during the recording. Yuan Yen pushed his glasses and nodded slightly. Yuan Yen had a rough idea of the selection criteria of the program team. He was more satisfied that after the 3 youngsters were chosen, they did not pick any more youngsters. Instead, they picked some middle-aged artists to add to the background of the program. Indeed, in a program, there should be a reasonable combination. The youth's drive and passion, the middle-aged steadiness and maturity, complemented each other well. It would be inappropriate if they were biased towards either. I'll help you call old Dan and old Ma to ask for their opinions. I'm familiar with them. Yuan Yen had decided to accept the invitation. Although he had not officially agreed, he felt that since he was going to do it, he should do his best and pull a few suitable friends to play the Limit Challenge. That's great. Thank you, Yoon Young-fong said in surprise. Both of them added together could not even compare to a word from Yuan Yen. Soon, Dan Hongkuei's phone was dialed by Yuan Yen. Yuan Yen told Dan Hongkuei that he was going to participate in the program and wanted to drag him along. The program isn't bad. We can innovate and create new tricks. Why not give it a try? Yuan Yen easily convinced Dan Hongkuei. Dan Hongkuei had reached a preliminary agreement. Of course, the specifics still needed Yoon Young-fong and Ran Min to visit and discuss in person. However, with this phone call, Dan Hongkuei could basically confirm it. However, things did not go so smoothly. Ma Jianwei did not agree. He was really busy. Ma Jianwei, who was not picky about roles, had accepted many film contracts. His schedule was arranged from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. He could be called the entertainment industry's model worker. Do you have any other candidates? Yuan Yen asked after putting down the phone. In the end, we're considering teacher Jie Yuchen and teacher Sun Jinyue, Yoon Young-fong said. Sun Jinyue. He's a little younger and has a straightforward personality. Let me think, old Xie might be better. Let me tell you, old Xie is a little arrogant, but it's not arrogance in the sense of pride. Using the popular saying now, he's just a little arrogant. Maybe it's because he's filmed too many important roles and can't let go of the burden of being an idol. Yuan Yen said with a smile, but it doesn't matter. Old Xie has a good personality. You can criticize him or scold him. As long as it's reasonable, he won't hold a grudge. Since Yuan Yen said that Jie Yuchen was suitable, he would first test Jie Yuchen's opinion. Variety show? I don't go on variety shows. Don't look for me. As expected, Jie Yuchen rejected her right away. There's nothing absolute in this world. It's not like you're allergic to variety shows. Let me tell you how fun this show is. Just listen. Yuan Yen told Jie Yuchen everything. Eventually, Jie Yuchen was tempted. Perhaps he was tired from filming and wanted to change things to adjust his mentality, so he became the last celebrity host of the Limit Challenge. With Yuan Yan's help, the Limit Challenge went unexpectedly smoothly. However, due to the arrival of the Spring Festival, Yoon Young-fong did not announce it immediately. Instead, he held it back and continued his preparations. Everything was ready, except for the final push. The Spring Festival was here. Yang Huan brought Yang Chongguei and Dong Yue back to their hometown to celebrate the new year while Yang Yi, Murphy, and the 2 children stayed in River City. There was nothing they could do about it. Plans could never keep up with changes. Yang Yi thought that Tong Tong would recover quickly, but Tong Tong did not have diarrhea anymore and his face was slowly turning rosy. However, perhaps it was because he caught a cold from taking a stroll outside, or some other reason. The little guy caught a cold on the 27th day of the lunar calendar. The little guy started sneezing at night and coughed the next day. His nose was running, his eyes were red, and he had a slight fever of more than 38 degrees Celsius. Yang Yi and Murphy quickly brought him to the hospital to see a doctor. It was a viral cold. The fever was not high, so he did not need to take medicine, but he had to be taken good care of at home. To let the little guy sleep comfortably, reduce outdoor activities, and increase the humidity in the house, Yang Yi even bought an air humidifier on his way back. According to the doctor's advice, they had spent a long time at home. It was obvious that they could not bring Tong Tong back to the countryside under such circumstances. Murphy had privately protested to Yang Yi. After all, if Tong Tong's condition worsened after they returned to their hometown, it would be a huge problem to seek medical treatment. Murphy was right, and Yang Yi understood that. In fact, Tong Tong was only 2 months old. No matter what, he should not have to travel such a long distance to such a remote environment in his hometown. However, Yang Yi and Murphy were inexperienced. Murphy used to live on her father's farm, which was not considered a rural area. It was a short drive to the town, and the medical facilities there were not bad at all. Yang Yi had never experienced such a thing before. When he brought Shi home, Shi was already 4 years old. She did not have to worry about such things at all. Luckily, there was still time to deal with the problem. In order to take care of Tong Tong, Yang Yi had to stay in Zhongqing with Murphy and Shi. Yang Huan was the only one who could bring the old folks home to celebrate the new year. This was another problem. Without any preparation, how could Yang Yi bring Cici to celebrate the new year with the 4 of them in such a lively manner? Chapter 666. She was sad for a long time yesterday because she couldn't go back to her hometown with her grandparents. However, after a good night's sleep, the little girl's mood returned to being optimistic and cheerful. With her parents by her side, what was there to be unhappy about? There's always a rainbow-colored river winding through Fairy Tale Town, tainted with the perverse aura of magic, yet twisted and turned in love. The day before New Year's Eve, in the morning when the atmosphere of the new year wasn't too strong, Murphy's gentle singing kicked off the curtains. Yang Yi went out. He took advantage of the fact that it wasn't New Year's Eve and that some shops were still open to buy some supplies for the new year. Speaking of which, this was the first new year that he personally organized as the head of the family, so Yang Yi had to make this new year more exquisite. Murphy had nothing to do, so she took Yang Yi's guitar and sang a few songs for Shi and Tong Tong. Although she didn't play the guitar often, she was still a musician, so she still had some basic skills. As a matter of fact, Murphy easily strummed the songs from Fairy Tale Town. Shi listened happily at the side, beaming with joy. She also stepped on the sofa and jumped around. When it came to parts that she was familiar with, the little girl would even sing along with her mother. I heard that Peter Pan is still young. Murphy shook her head lightly, her beautiful eyes smiling as she looked at her daughter. She pounced forward to her mother's side, her long hair fluttering to her temples. The little girl found it very amusing and giggled. This laughter made her unable to catch her breath when she was fighting to sing, so her voice sounded a little breathless. She could only be heard singing, Jack has a harp and magic. I heard that there's a candy house in Fairy Tale Town, and Cinderella lost her beloved glass slipper. There were also parts where she forgot the lyrics, but what was more mischievous was her singing. It perfectly illustrated the word, cynical. No, you're singing off key. Murphy couldn't help but laugh as she said, yeah. Perhaps it was because it was happy listening to its mother's singing. Xiao Qianyu, who was lying in the small cradle next to it, was also dancing with joy. It even grinned and used its tender vowels to express its emotions. She couldn't carry the little guy all the time, so there was a 4-legged blue cradle in the living room. It looked like a boat suspended in the air, and could be gently rocked. Tong was lying in the cradle. He was beside his mother, so he could look at her and listen to her and his sister sing. Hee. Mom, my brother is laughing. Cici excitedly slipped down from the sofa and sat on the carpet, looking at her brother in the cradle. Although singing was fun, her little brother was much more. The little girl was holding a balloon hammer with a yellow handle and a red cartoon pattern. She was gesturing in front of her younger brother. However, Tong Tong still didn't know how to reach out his hand to grab it. He could only watch as his chubby little arms moved gently. He grinned with his toothless mouth and laughed happily. Little brother, Do you want to play? But you don't know how to play. This naughty sister was still giggling as she teased Tong Tong. Murphy watched from the side and couldn't help but feel happy for the warm interaction between the siblings. However, she also saw that Tong Tong's nose was still running. It wasn't much, but when she thought about how she looked when she had a cold, she knew that Tong Tong was suffering from a cold. It had to be said that although little Momo had caught a cold, his mental state was not bad. The little guy seemed to have a very optimistic attitude. Previously, when he had diarrhea, his body was weak, but the little guy would still tease and tease in his father's and mother's arms. He would open his big eyes and laugh. If he could learn how to speak, would he be happier to use new words to express his emotions? Of course, she still had to help Tong Tong blow his nose. Murphy used a small towel to wipe off the snot outside his nose. Then, she tore some medical cotton balls from the side table and twisted them into the shape of a small stick. She gently stuck the stick into Tong Tong's nose and wiped the snot out of his nasal cavity. Murphy was very serious as she did it. She watched from the side with interest. Tong Tong, who was lying in the cradle, didn't know what was going on. He opened his big eyes and looked at his mother's face, which made him feel comfortable. After a while, he was inexplicably happy. He started to dance and laugh. Don't move. Here's your nose. Murphy was amused as she gently pressed Tong Tong's little hand. She couldn't help but feel happy when she looked at this smiling baby. Yang Yi came back from his shopping spree around noon. However, he was busy preparing lunch. Although Murphy could help wash the rice and cook, Yang Yi still had to do the cooking. Therefore, all the things he bought could only be sorted out in the afternoon. In the afternoon, Yang Yi prepared a pen and ink on the table in the side hall. He cut out a large piece of red paper inlaid with gold and spread it on the table. It looked like he was going to sell Spring Festival couplets. Papa, what are you doing? She was very interested. She followed behind her father and watched him prepare. Steamed Bun also followed behind She. This guy was now She's follower. Of course, he was also very interested in Tong Tong. However, his big master didn't allow him to play with Tong Tong yet. Your papa is going to write Spring Festival couplets. Let's watch Papa write, okay? Murphy came from the living room with Tong Tong in her arms. She sat down on a chair and said with a smile, okay. Actually, there was no need for her mother to say anything. The little girl had already climbed onto the chair in high spirits. She stood on the chair and supported herself on the table. She curiously watched her father dip the brush into the ink on the inkstone. Yang Yi's expression was a little serious. He knew calligraphy and had learned it in his previous life. However, in comparison, his calligraphy could only be said to be passable. Zither, chess, calligraphy, painting, chess, and calligraphy couldn't compare to his zither and painting. Moreover, he hadn't written in a long time. Yang Yi pondered for a while before he lowered his wrist and started writing. Everything goes smoothly, and a lucky star arrives. Everything goes well. Good fortune comes. Looking at Yang Yi's writing, Mo Fei also read it out word by word. Yang Yi used a square European regular script. It looked neat and stable. Between the strokes, there was a dangerous and rugged feeling. Of course, compared to semi-cursive and large seal script, this regular script was much easier to recognize. After writing a Spring Festival couplet, Yang Yi paused. Looking at the words he had written, he regretfully shook his head. It had been too long since he had written with a brush, so it seemed a little rusty. Originally, Mo Fei was reading the couplets with great interest, and her heart was full of pride. She felt that Yang Yi was really versatile and knew everything. But when she saw Yang Yi shaking his head, crumpling the couplets into a ball and throwing them away, she couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Why did you throw it away? Wasn't it written very well? Murphy asked. She was also very confused. However, she still couldn't understand what her father was doing. Hence, she could only look at him in confusion. It's not up to standard. The brushwork is stiff. When I put the brush away, the tip of the brush was too sticky. Let me write another one. Yang Yi smiled. All right then. Murphy said regretfully. Then, Murphy looked at Yang Yi writing again. She read, Heaven increases the years and people live longer. Spring fills the universe with blessings. Everything is renewed. This time, Yang Yi's writing satisfied him a little, so he didn't throw it away. You can even recognize this word? Yang Yi pointed at the word sway in the Spring Festival couplet in surprise. This was the traditional Chinese word for sway. Yang Yi wrote such a traditional Chinese Spring Festival couplet. Compared to door and other words, the traditional Chinese word for sway was much more complicated. I used to live in Harbor City, okay? Murphy giggled. Moreover, do you think I'm so stupid? Even if I don't recognize it, I can tell from the context. Yang Yi had forgotten about this. He smiled and shook his head, then continued to write. He had prepared a lot of red paper for the Spring Festival couplets. He just wanted to throw away some of the bad ones. She was watching her father's writing attentively. She didn't know if her father's serious attitude could plant a seed of seriousness in the little girl's heart. Chapter 667. To write Spring Festival couplets, one had to stick them up. Yang Yi kept the stack of Spring Festival couplets for the whole night. The next morning, taking advantage of the warmth of the sun outside, he prepared to take the curious baby Shi to the gate of the villa to start pasting the Spring Festival couplets. Of course, before that, he had to apply paste. Look, Dad. Dip it in paste and brush it around this area. Yang Yi instructed his daughter, and then handed the small brush to Shi. You can brush the remaining couplets and the horizontal couplets with paste. Be careful not to brush too much, and not too little. Shi had long wanted to help her father work, although in her mind, this work was not tiring, but to try new things and help her father. The little girl stood on the small stool, her left hand on the table, and her right hand holding the small brush. Fortunately, Yang Yi noticed his negligence and quickly came over to pull the paste closer to Shi. It's so strange. She saw paste for the first time. The sticky feeling made Shi feel a little uncomfortable. It's okay. After this paste is applied, the couplets will be firmly stuck to the wall after it dries. Yang Yi said. Shi brushed for a while. After all, she was small and weak. After brushing the whole couplet, she had to turn around, but accidentally, her left hand pressed on the paste that she had just brushed. Aya. She saw that her little hand was sticky as if she had touched the porridge soup. She clenched and loosened her hand, feeling very uncomfortable. She could only look at her father pitifully and ask for help. Papa, what should I do? There's so much paste. In fact, it was okay to get a little paste on it, and it would be fine after washing it. However, Shi's reaction was a little big, so Yang Yi had to take her to wash her hands. After being washed by the warm water, the little girl's little hand became red and tender again. It was more comfortable to be clean. Although she didn't like paste, Shi's work attitude was not ambiguous. She continued to help her father with the Spring Festival couplets. Finally, she finished. Yang Yi brought Shi to the entrance of the villa to put up the Spring Festival couplets. Put the first couplet on the right side and the second couplet on the left side. Daddy told you yesterday which is the first couplet. Do you still remember? I know that there are steamed buns, woof, 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 which is the first line of the couplet. She followed behind her father and said while jumping up and down. She remembered that when her father said this, he even made a small joke. Because of this, she remembered it especially clearly. Steamed bun wagged his tail and ran to the side of everyone. He was the happiest one to come out for some fresh air. However, when he heard his little master call his name and bark, the smart yellow dog slowed down and turned his head to look over in confusion. However, no one gave him an explanation. Yang Yi carefully placed the other Spring Festival couplets on the low wall with the paste on them. Then he picked up the couplet that read, Happy to live in a treasured land that thrives for 1,000 years, and stuck it on the top, which was the direction of the right side. Help Daddy hold the bottom of the couplet. Let's aim at the four corners so that it can be stuck vertically. Yang-yi instructed she to help. Okay. The little girl happily ran over and helped her father hold the bottom two corners. This way, even if she wasn't tall, she could make the best use of her body. She still didn't like paste, so she used her fingers to carefully press on the red paper. She didn't dare to press her whole hand on it, for fear that the paste would get on her hand again. After pasting the couplet on the courtyard entrance, Yang-yi and she went to the entrance of the villa. At this time, Murphy left Tong Tong on the small cradle that she could see and walked to the entrance with her camera. Daddy, look at the camera and smile. Murphy wanted to take a photo of Yang-yi and his daughter. He. The little girl helped to press the couplet and turned her head back with her bright eyes. Although she was wearing winter clothes, the little girl was full of vitality and in high spirits. Her cheeks were slightly rosy under the bright sunlight and the red paper of the Spring Festival couplet. It was as if the spring breeze was blowing and the flowers were blooming 10 miles away. Gotcha! Murphy captured this scene and froze it. After Mo Fei took a few photos and came back with satisfaction, little Momo, who was lying in the cradle, began to babble. Mo Fei didn't know if it felt that it was a little bored. You also want to play with your sister, right? You also want to help Daddy work and take photos with Mommy, right? Murphy smiled. She held Tong Tong's armpits with both hands and carried him out of the cradle. She held him upright in front of her and talked to him intimately. As if this was a fair conversation, Tong Tong looked at his mother in confusion for a while. Finally, he opened his mouth and laughed. He didn't know why he was so happy. The eve of the Spring Festival was busy and fulfilling. After all the preparations were done, Yang-yi took out a string of red firecrackers and hung them on a tree in the courtyard in the evening. Daddy, let's not set off firecrackers, okay? I'm scared. When she saw the firecrackers, she remembered that when her father set off firecrackers at her grandfather's house last year, she was worried that her father would be blown up. Moreover, the firecrackers this time were so big that she was even more scared. She grabbed her father's clothes and begged him bitterly. Yang-yi looked back in surprise and saw his daughter's tearful face. It seemed that she would cry if he didn't give up the idea of setting off firecrackers. Yang-yi couldn't help but feel happy. He smiled and touched Shishi's little head and said, "Little fool, look at what Daddy is holding. Are these real firecrackers?" Yang-yi pulled Shishi's little hand over and let her touch the red firecrackers. The little girl immediately felt the hard plastic texture of the firecrackers. This is fake. It's just a model. After we plug it in and turn on the switch, it will crackle like firecrackers, but it's not real firecrackers, Yang-yi explained to Shishi. Won't it explode? The little girl asked doubtfully. Of course not. It's just the sound of firecrackers. We are celebrating the Spring Festival with such an atmosphere. Only then can it be called the Spring Festival, right? Yang-yi said with a smile. It was not that Jiang City prohibited firecrackers and fireworks. The main reason why Yang-yi didn't buy real firecrackers was that after the firecrackers were set off, there would be a strong smell of gunpowder. He was worried that the smell would choke his Tong Tong, so he used fake firecrackers. Only then did Cece feel relieved. After getting down from her father's arms, she not only smiled through her tears, but also circled around the fake firecrackers curiously, asking her father to show her how the firecrackers sounded. Yang-yi pulled out a socket and plugged it in. The big red firecrackers hanging on the tree flickered with red light and made crackling sounds of firecrackers exploding. At first, the sudden appearance of the red light and the sound gave Cece a fright. The little girl hurriedly hid behind her father, looking for her most trusted shield. But soon, she found that there was only movement and no threat at all. The little girl gathered her courage and stuck out her little head. It turns out that it really doesn't explode. However, under the gradually falling curtain of night, the flickering fake firecrackers were quite beautiful. She blinked her big eyes and pulled her father's hand, letting him come closer to take a closer look. At this time, a dark figure ran into the yard. Only when he got closer could he see Steamed Bun's yellow fur under the light of the yard. Woof, woof. Steamed Bun seemed to be frightened by the sound of the firecrackers. He bared his teeth and barked at the firecrackers. "Steamed Bun, don't bark," Yang-e scolded. He was worried that Steamed Bun would scare the child. Hee, Steamed Bun thought they were real firecrackers. She smiled and bent down. She hugged Steamed Bun's neck and comforted him. "Steamed Bun, don't be afraid. These are fake firecrackers that Papa bought. They're not real." It turned out that Steamed Bun was just a fox pretending to be a tiger. Just now, when he was beside Yang-e, he barked at the firecrackers, but in his heart, he was very scared. When she hugged him, the little guy turned his head and drilled into She's arms. He whimpered in a low voice, as if he was wronged. Yang-e inexplicably thought of a sentence, "Who isn't a baby?" On the contrary, Tong Tong was a lot bolder in the house. Although the sound of the firecrackers was blocked by the door, the little guy didn't seem to be afraid at all. It must be known that other children were afraid of firecrackers. However, Tong Tong was still calmly drinking milk in his mother's arms and enjoying his New Year's Eve dinner. After the firecrackers went off for a while, Yang-e pulled out the lights so that they wouldn't disturb the people. Of course, the big red firecrackers were still on the tree. They could be used in the early morning and tomorrow. Happy New Year! Although it was just a family dinner for the four of them, there were Dad, Mom, little brother who was nibbling on his fingers, and Cece, who had helped out for the whole day, so the New Year's atmosphere was very good. Cece couldn't stop smiling happily. She raised the small glass of soda with her parents and gave each other their blessings. Chapter 668. On New Year's Eve, it was natural for friends and family to call each other to greet each other. In this regard, Yang-e and Murphy were not very proactive. They only called their parents, and the rest were just friends calling to greet each other. Even so, the phone rang all night, and there was an endless stream of calls. Last year, because there was no signal in the countryside, Yang-e escaped. This year, he was not so lucky. Not only were there close friends, but there were also many work partners. Especially last year, when Yang-e's various businesses opened, the executives of various companies also called their boss to congratulate him, such as Xiao Ai, Lu Benji, and even Li Long, the person in charge of Sahara Express in Yongqing. Yang-e saw that the phone calls were endless, and he did not have time to spend New Year's Eve with his family. As Murphy covered her mouth and snickered, Yang-e simply turned off his phone and threw it aside. However, there were two phone calls worth mentioning. One was from Guazi. The little fatty knew that Yang-e did not go back to his hometown for New Year's Eve, so he called excitedly and told Yang-e that tomorrow, which was the first day of the new year, there would be a New Year's Eve event at the municipal square in front of Jiangqing City's City Hall. There would be lantern riddles, lion and dragon dances, and all kinds of fun activities. He wanted to invite Yang-e and his family to play together. The other phone call was from Chan Yijie. After he greeted Yang-e, he asked Yang-e if he watched the New Year's Eve gala. Then, he mysteriously asked Yang-e not to change the channel at 10:20 p.m. This guy must have been invited to the New Year's Eve gala. Yang-e said to Murphy with a smile, "I just don't know which song he's going to sing. I think it should be Steady Happiness." Murphy guessed. Eason specifically called to say that he's going to sing your song. Among the songs you wrote for him, there are only two Mandarin songs. Long Time No See is a bit too sad. Only this song is the most suitable for the theme of the New Year's Eve. But didn't he just release the album at the beginning of the month? Yang-e asked in confusion, shouldn't the Spring Festival Gala have already been confirmed a few months ago? Not only did Yang-e not know much about this World Spring Festival Gala, but he also did not know much about the entertainment industry in this world. Of course, the media had also exposed the Spring Festival Gala's program list before, but Yang-e and Murphy did not pay attention to it. Murphy was still quite knowledgeable. She explained to Yang-e, "It's true that all the programs have to be confirmed before the middle of December, but not only the old songs will be performed on the stage of the Spring Festival Gala. Every year, the program team will receive a batch of new songs for the New Year celebration, and a few of them will be selected to be performed on the Spring Festival Gala. So when we watch the Spring Festival Gala, we will realize that there are some songs that we haven't heard before. By the same logic, although Isan's song hasn't been released yet, his song might have been submitted to the program by Tianxiong Records during the selection process. Of course, as for what song it was, Yang Yi and Murphy had to wait until 10 o'clock to find out. It had to be said that this World Spring Festival Gala was still very exciting. Due to the perfect copyright protection, this world's entertainment industry was even more competitive. The Spring Festival Gala, which had the highest viewership ratings, naturally became the best opportunity to become famous. Other than Yang Yi and Murphy, perhaps every artist would try their best to get on the stage of the Spring Festival Gala. Therefore, whether it was singing and dancing, drama, or skits, every program was carefully choreographed. There were endless highlights and laughs to be had. With such a meticulous program, it was naturally amazing. Although it had not developed to the point of using dazzling technical special effects to create a more magnificent program, every program contained a lot of memorable details. Of course, it was not only the program that was interesting, but also the little highlights in the middle of the program. This year's Spring Festival Gala, the host had an additional segment to read the audience's wonderful responses. The host's witty responses were also very interesting. These wonderful responses were, of course, intercepted by the netizens' comments on the program under the micro-broadcasting section of the Spring Festival Gala. "Isn't this micro-broadcasting from your company? Did you advertise on the Spring Festival Gala?" Murphy asked Yang Yi in surprise. Yes, product placement. Yang Yi had almost forgotten about this. 3 months ago, the CEO of Backwave Technology Company had asked him to approve this large advertising budget. Yang Yi had even praised their idea. Although this Spring Festival Gala was only celebrated by the 4 of them, Yang Yi and the others still had a very warm time. Under the bright lights in the living room, Murphy was nestled in Yang Yi's arms. The 2 of them were chatting while watching the Spring Festival Gala. Tong Tong, who had already fallen asleep, was lying in the cradle next to them. The breathable mosquito net blocked the changing lights and the voices of the adults. The little guy was sleeping soundly. There was also Shi. The little girl was originally sitting between her parents, but she couldn't sit still. Sometimes, she would get up to sing and dance with a song and dance. Sometimes, she would run over to play with little Guai and steamed bun. She wasn't as engrossed in the Spring Festival Gala as her parents. Other than the song and dance programs, which were relatively interesting, and the children's dance attracted Shi's attention. As for the other programs, Shi couldn't understand them at all. After all, Shi couldn't understand the ancient Chinese singing of the drama and the humorous language of the skits and crosstalk. Therefore, when her parents were convulsing with laughter, Shi felt a little bored. Instead, she felt that throwing small balls for steamed bun and little Guai to chase after was more interesting. The cats meowing, the dogs barking, and Shi's cheerful laughter echoed in the house. The most important happiness of the Spring Festival spread through the laughter. Late at night, Shi, who was tired from playing, fell asleep. Yang Yi carried the little girl upstairs to the master bedroom to sleep. Then, he came down to watch the Spring Festival Gala with Murphy. After God knows how many programs had passed, the host finally announced the program and the subtitles of Chen Yijie's program appeared on the screen. Steady Happiness, Lyrics and Melody. Yang Yi. It was indeed steady happiness. Murphy turned her head and looked at Yang Yi. There was a hint of pride in her eyes. The corners of her mouth curled up, and she smiled sweetly as if saying, "See, I guessed right? Chen Yijie was a big star after all. He was one of the few artists who could sing solo. Although the whole song could only be sung once, there was no time to repeat it a second time. One day, I began to feel happiness from the ordinary days. I saw the clear distance, the happiness that I want." The charm of Chen Yijie's voice was that he could turn the music that was as plain as boiled water into a confession that he had been planning for a long time. The lyrics contained an intoxicating rhythm and mellow, rich emotions. It was not the first time she had heard this song. Murphy snuggled in Yang Yi's arms, but she felt that the lyrics of Yang Yi's song had touched her heart. Happiness didn't need to be magnificent or romantic. Just this kind of simplicity was enough to make people satisfied. How could he be so good? How could he write such a beautiful melody and delicate lyrics? As if their hearts were connected, Murphy turned her head and looked at the excellent man who fascinated her. Yang Yi was also feeling that happiness did not come easily. He lowered his head and looked at Murphy. Their eyes met. Love was as deep as water, and success came naturally. Yang Yi did not rehearse. He lowered his head and gently kissed Murphy's soft red lips. Murphy let out a lazy snort. She could not help but stretch out her hands and gently grab Yang Yi's head. Her fingers were inserted into Yang Yi's hair, as if she was worried that she would lose her strength and fall. How long had it been since the two of them were so intimate? A few months. Nearly half a year. In order not to provoke Yang Yi, who had been holding back for a long time, Yang Yi did not want to hurt Murphy, who was pregnant with Tong Tong. The two of them really had not been so intimate for a long time. Even if they occasionally kissed, it was just a touch on the forehead or a light touch on the lips. At this moment, the two of them, who had been holding back for a long time, had a long and deep French kiss. In the end, Murphy was a little out of breath. They looked at each other and smiled, their lips parting. Sorry, I almost wanted to snatch the food from Tao Wu. Yang Yi smiled softly and withdrew his left hand from Murphy's open front. It doesn't matter if you snatch it or not. Anyway, Momo won't be able to finish it. Mo Fei pursed her lips that were a little red because of the kiss and smiled. I'd better not. I'm afraid that I can't control myself. Yang Yi deliberately used a strange Cantonese accent and teased her. Murphy chuckled. However, she did not know why, but her face was flushed and her eyes moved with a trace of seductive electricity. She bit her lower lip and said softly, I know that you love me, but people say that after giving birth, it can be done after 6 weeks. We are now 2 months pregnant. You mean? Yang Yi's eyes lit up. He grabbed Murphy's hands and asked with a smile. What? What did I say? What are you thinking? Don't you want to watch the New Year's gala? Murphy was stubborn, but her eyes were full of smiles. How can the New Year's gala be better than you? Yang Yi turned off the TV with a snap. He grabbed his collar and stretched out his arm to twist it. His shirt was also taken off, revealing his strong chest and abdominal muscles. Murphy blushed at the sight. She could not help but say, Do you want to do it in the living room? Then let's go upstairs. Yang Yi carried Murphy in his arms and rushed upstairs. Tao Wu. I know. I'll settle you down first, then I'll carry him. On New Year's Eve, the whole country was waiting for the countdown. However, in the bedroom of these two guys, it was a red wave, a pair of mandarin ducks crossed necks, and a poem said, The apes on both sides of the river can't stop crying, the heavy artillery has passed the 10,000 mountains. Chapter 669. On the first day of Chinese New Year, Yang Yi woke up feeling refreshed. Murphy's face was also rosy, as if it was coated with a layer of luster. Of course, she was the happiest. When she woke up early in the morning, she received a red packet from her father, which awakened her beautiful memories of Chinese New Year. The little girl did not even bother to wash her face. She giggled and ran to her mother's room in her slippers. She said to her mother, who was changing Tong Tong's diaper, Congratulations. Obviously, she was also asking her mother for a red packet. She happily held the 2 red packets. She could not bear to put them in her pocket. She kicked off her slippers, climbed onto the bed, and waved the red packets in front of Tong Tong's eyes. Hee, little brother, I have a red packet. Do you want one? Rather than saying that she wanted to share her red packet with her little brother, it was more accurate to say that she was showing off to her little brother that she had received a red packet. This red piece of paper was still a little attractive to Little Rascal. The little rascal didn't even blink as it stared at it closely. However, Little rascal was busy eating its own fingers and didn't bother to make a sound to ask for it from its sister. Murphy looked at the siblings in amusement. After she finished showing off, she said, "Little brother also has a red packet. Look, it's all in his clothes." Today, Tong Tong was wearing new clothes like his father, mother, and sister. There was a cheeky zebra cartoon on it, and the teeth in the zebra's smile were actually big pockets. They could be stuffed into the pockets by unzipping them in the middle. Murphy opened Tong Tong's pockets and showed the 2 red packets to Shi. Obviously, Yang Yi and Murphy would not favor one over the other. Moreover, the red packets were actually just a symbol. They represented the parents' wishes for their children for the new year. She was a little surprised to see Tong Tong's red packet. After a while, Shi, who had just finished washing up, could not help but look at the big red packet on her brother's stomach. Tong Tong did not notice his sister peeping at him. He bit his pacifier and waved his hand happily. Perhaps he wanted to play with his sister. "Mom, I can help little brother get his red packet." She jumped down from the bed and moved step by step to her mother, who was arranging the milk powder and diapers in her small school bag. Murphy had already discovered Shi's little action. She knew that this little girl was envious of her brother's red packet. At this moment, when she heard Shi's words, she couldn't help but laugh. "Well, let your brother take his red packet. If you still want a red packet, ask Dad for it." After finally dispelling Shi's idea of helping her brother keep his red packet, Murphy picked up Tong Tong and affectionately kissed him on the forehead. "Little guy, you don't even know what almost happened just now." When Cici went downstairs, she saw her father talking to Xiao Guai and the others. The 3 British Shorthairs and the dog were standing in a row, as if they were being inspected. It was very interesting. The little girl forgot her purpose of coming again and joined in happily. Yang Yi felt that today was the new year. No matter what, he should give these 4 little family members red packets, so that they could have a rich and happy new year. "Steamed bun, bring your rice bowl over." Yang Yi patted Steamed bun, who had already smelled the scent and was eagerly wagging his tail, and pointed at the rice bowl next to his nest. Steamed bun was really smart. When the 3 British Shorthairs needed his master to personally deal with them, he immediately turned around and ran over after receiving the order. With his head in his mouth, he ran over with his personal rice bowl in his mouth. After putting it down, Steamed bun raised a paw and put it on Yang Yi's foot. He wagged his tail fawningly, as if he was asking for praise. "Big master, look, I've done it obediently." "Well done." Yang Yi rubbed Steamed bun's head and smiled as he put a few pieces of dried duck meat in Steamed bun's bowl. Not only that, Yang Yi also opened the box and took out a piece of beef bone that was slightly longer than a palm. It was a big dried bone with some meat hanging on it. This was the reason why Steamed bun was so excited. Seeing the big master take it out, Steamed bun couldn't help but grab onto his trousers. He stood up, put his 2 front paws together, and shook his head up and down as if he was bowing. "Hee, Papa, Steamed bun is also telling you to be happy and get rich." She thought it was very funny. Of course, this was something that Yang Yi had taught Steamed bun before. He wasn't so smart that he could learn it on his own. The well-behaved Steamed bun got what he wanted. He received the most sumptuous snack meal since he was born. Usually, Yang Yi was worried that he would be picky about food, so he didn't give him snacks often, let alone so many today. It was the 3 naughty cats' turn. They weren't interested in Steamed bun's meat and bones at all. Even though Steamed bun was holding the bones and chewing happily, they didn't even bother to look at him. However, they knew that there was going to be something delicious because they saw the bag of dried fish in their master's hand. Meow. Little Gray was the first one who couldn't sit still. He got up from the ground and walked around his rice bowl. From time to time, he raised his head to look at the big master. He couldn't help but meow. "Come, Shi, you give each of them a handful of dried fish and a handful of these biscuits." Yang Yi smiled and let the excited little girl distribute the New Year's gifts to the 3 kittens. Guazi invited Yang Yi and the others to play in the city square where the Spring Festival event was held. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, Yang Yi held Shi-Shi's hand and took Murphy to the city square of Wuhu district. Sure enough, it was very lively. The spacious municipal square was now filled with colorful flags and people. Not only were there many people at the lantern riddles, but there were also many people in front of the game and food stalls that had been planned beforehand. Yang Yi and Murphy didn't deliberately dress up. Murphy only wore a cap, and together with her long hair, it covered her beautiful face. But even so, they walked in the middle of the crowd and weren't recognized. At this time, the people playing in the city square were either families or couples. Everyone was glowing, talking and laughing with their families and friends. They were going for the fun. How could they have the time to look at the passers-by? Besides, who would have thought that there would be celebrities coming to play in such a place? Normally, Yang Yi wouldn't feel at ease bringing Murphy and the children to a place with so many people. But it was the Spring Festival. Wasn't it supposed to enjoy a lively atmosphere during the Spring Festival? Guazi and Yang Yi met in front of the beverage shop. He handed Shi the milk tea enthusiastically and said with a smile, "The lion and dragon dance will wait until 10:30. Let's go guess the lantern riddles first. At 10:15, I'll take you to find a good place to watch." However, after Shi took the milk tea, she didn't rush to drink it. Instead, she hugged the milk tea and looked at Guazi with her bright eyes. She said, "Uncle Gua, congratulations." Guazi didn't seem to understand. He smiled and replied, "Congratulations. That's it?" After waiting for a while, she couldn't help but pout. She couldn't help but say something. Guazi smiled and took out a red packet from his pocket. He handed it to Shi and said, "Little ancestor, of course, Uncle Gua has already prepared this for you. Do you think I'll forget?" The little girl who took the red packet was beaming with joy. However, it wasn't over yet. She giggled and said, "But what about my brother?" "Ha ha, all right. Don't make things difficult for Uncle Gua." Yang Yi couldn't help but laugh. He was amused by his daughter's brain circuit. "That's a must," Guazi said exaggeratedly. He took out another red packet from his pocket like a magic trick. "But, this red packet, is it for my brother? Or should I let you hold it for him?" "Give it to me. I'll hold it for my brother." She was so happy that she couldn't close her mouth. She shook her little butt and said as if it was a matter of course. Unfortunately, her mother snatched her love away. Murphy stopped the little money grubber's hand and smiled. "That won't do. What belongs to my brother should belong to him." After fooling around for a while, they went to guess the lantern riddles. The lantern riddles were bustling, but the riddles that were easy to guess had already been guessed by others. Murphy held on to Tong Tong and looked at a few with interest. However, even after pondering for a long time, she still couldn't guess the riddle. "Yang Yi, come and take a look. This is a knowing smile. What's the word E?" Murphy called Yang Yi over. A knowing smile. Yang Yi pondered for a moment before he smiled. "It's the word DUI. Why is it DUI?" Murphy couldn't figure it out. Because the combination of the word DUI and U is the word you. It's a joyful smile, so it's called a knowing smile. Yang Yi explained. "Is that even possible? You're so good at guessing riddles?" Murphy looked at Yang Yi in shock. She refused to believe it and asked Yang Yi to guess another one. "What's the word have to show?" "That's simple," Yang Yi said confidently. "How is it simple? I've been thinking about it for a long time," Murphy said unhappily. "Have to show your head. If you take it apart, you'll get the word no. However, there's another no that shows its head. It's the word cup in the word cup." Yang Yi explained to Murphy. On the other side, Guazi also showed off his clever brain to Shi. He guessed a few riddles one after another. For example, you have to use all your strength to scratch an itch. The answer to this riddle was to grasp the main point. Why is it to grasp the main point? She still didn't understand. Of course, It was also her first time hearing the phrase, grasp the main point. Because it says that you have to use all your strength to scratch an itch. Using all your strength means using all your strength. If you use all your strength, won't you scratch it hard? Guazi explained. Yes, yes. She nodded. Scratching an itch is also scratching, so you have to scratch harder. Grasp the main point. Guazi spread out his hands and said casually. He, all right. The little girl was still in a daze, but she felt that the way Uncle Xiao Gua spoke was very funny. After a while, Yang Yi and Guazi actually managed to guess a thick stack of riddles. In the end, Guazi brought Shi to the reception desk to exchange for the prize. This stack of riddles was enough for them to exchange for the grand prize, a 3-piece set on the bed. However, Shi didn't want the grand prize. Instead, she wanted the third prize, a little rabbit that could walk on its own once it was wound up. Whatever the child wants, just give it to her. Guazi shrugged and said to the staff, who didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Seeing how wasteful this fellow was, the onlookers felt sorry for him. However, who asked Shi to like it so much? Shi really liked this wind-up rabbit. Even when Uncle Xiao Gua brought them to a nearby shopping mall to find a place where they didn't have to squeeze with others to watch the lion and dragon dance, and that spectacular performance overwhelmed the little girl, she was still unwilling to let go of the rabbit. The spring festival is the most fun. After returning home, the little girl still couldn't forget about it. When she called her grandparents, she happily told them this. Chapter 670. Yang Huan came back before the Spring Festival. Together with Guazi and Zhu Jie, she went to the airport to pick up the other 3 celebrity hosts under Mo Xiaozhuan's arrangement. The first episode of the Limit Challenge would be recorded in Rivertown, but before that, they would have 2 days to prepare. They would record the theme song that Yang Yi had written for the Limit Challenge in the Hua Yi Brothers and Phoebe Studios' small building. It was also a good opportunity for them to get to know each other. It had to be said that the 3 of them did not get along well at first. Yang Huan and Guazi were best friends, but Zhu Jie was somewhat ostracized by the 2 of them. After all, Yang Yi and Murphy were at loggerheads with Zhu Jie, as well as Tianmei Management Agency. Yang Huan and Guazi knew about it. It was inevitable that they would be hostile to Zhu Jie. Yang Yi thought about it, so he took the initiative to talk to Zhu Jie in the minivan. Zhu Jie, you're the most famous one among the 3 of you. Mr. Yuan and the others can recognize you, so you have to help Yang Huan and Xiao Gua to get to know each other as soon as possible, Yang Yi said. That's a must. Brother Yang, don't worry. Yang Huan and Xiao Gua are my younger brothers and sisters. If I don't take care of them, who will? Zhu Jie said with a smile. Zhu Jie was thrilled to be able to follow in the footsteps of his idol, Yang Yi. He was worried that Yang Yi would look down on him and cast him aside. Then, his fame would fade bit by bit, and he would eventually become a nobody. Zhu Jie had read the proposal for the Limit Challenge. With his experience in variety shows, Zhu Jie had no doubts about Yang Yi's words. The show would really be a hit. Therefore, he had to work hard and not be abandoned by his peers. However, young Master Jie was young Master Jie after all. He still thought highly of himself when he spoke in private. Guazi did not mind his tone, but Yang Huan was more straightforward, so he was annoyed. Humph, who needs his care? I don't believe that the 3 teachers will look down on us just because we're not famous. Xiao Gua and I will do our best to make them accept us, said Yang Huan. Zhu Jie also felt Yang Huan's hostility towards him. He was a little confused, but he had encountered this kind of situation many times when he was working on variety shows. At this moment he chuckled and said, That's right. Director Ran said that as the only female among the 6 hosts, Yang Huan's ability is not inferior to the other men's. She doesn't need the other men's care at all. Perhaps, with my skinny arms and legs, I'll need your care. As he spoke, Zhu Jie really pulled up his sleeves, revealing a section of his arm. His skin was soft and tender, and even his biceps were limp. It made people wonder if this guy had the strength to truss a chicken. Guazi was deeply touched by Zhu Jie's words. He couldn't help but laugh and say, "Zhu Jie, you're right. I usually call her Master Huan. Do you think I call her that for nothing?" Yang Huan rolled her eyes at Guazi. She felt that this guy was also mocking her. "All right, Yang Huan. You need to control your temper." Yang Yi felt that he had to correct Yang Huan's attitude. She was already an adult, yet she was still so impulsive. She would be at a disadvantage in the future when she entered society. Seeing Yang Yi's stern face, Yang Huan immediately kept quiet. An elder brother was like a father. When she was growing up, apart from playing the role of an elder brother who sheltered her from the wind and rain, he would also educate her like a father sometimes. Apart from not punishing her physically, Yang Yi often scolded Yang Huan, who was a troublemaker. Especially now that Yang Yi was becoming more and more imposing, Yang Huan was frightened when he put on a stern face. She didn't dare to talk back to him anymore. Let's not talk about how this show requires the six of you to work together and support each other like real brothers. Let's talk about how you're an artist now, so you need to have a good attitude. Who do you think you are? You're just a newbie who doesn't even have your own work. What right do you have to talk to Zhu Jie so casually? Yang Yi scolded. "Brother Yang, it's not Master Huan's fault. She was just joking." Zhu Jie unknowingly changed his tone along with Guazi. Zhu Jie's heart was pounding when he saw Yang Yi's anger. He had been dominated by Yang Yi in the past. How could he not be scared? "I'm scolding her for her own good. Don't get involved." Yang Yi glared at Zhu Jie. Zhu Jie immediately shut his mouth. "Do you think you can do whatever you want just because I'm your elder brother?" Yang Yi looked at Yang Huan and said faintly, "This industry isn't as simple as you think. I can help you take fewer detours, but I can't help you soar. If you want to succeed and be Yang Huan instead of Yang Yi's sister, you need to have your own network, make friends, and make your own achievements. I'm not being unreasonable. I know how to respect others." Yang Huan was still a little unconvinced and muttered softly. She was not usually bossy and domineering. She would only throw her temper around with people she knew and trusted. For example, in the crew of Drawing Sword, Yang Huan took the initiative to bring things and buy drinks for the actors, taking the initiative to learn from them. Shan Wani and the others were full of praise for Yang Huan because of Yang Huan's humble and studious attitude. How could he say that she was a bully and did whatever she wanted? She was only standing up for her elder brother and sister-in-law and was hostile to Zhu Jie. Her elder brother's scolding made Yang Huan feel a little wronged. "You're still talking back?" Yang Yi glared. Yang Huan lowered her head in fear. "Big brother Yang, I don't care at all." "Really?" Zhu Jie could not help but say, "Big brother Yang, Master Huan knows about it too. Don't be angry. Calm down." Guazi handed him a bottle of water. Yang Yi's tone softened and said, "Zhu Jie isn't angry with you because he's one of us. I personally invited him to participate in the show. However, Yuan Yen, Dan Hongkue, and Jie Yuchen are different. They're all celebrities who have been famous for a long time and have students all over the world. I don't know how many graduates of Shanghai Drama Academy have to greet Yuan Yen as a disciple. There's also the best actor and best actor. If you don't respect them, others will, even if they don't hold it against you. In fact, whether it's Teacher Yuan, Teacher Dan, or others, including Manager Yun, the two directors, the cameraman, and the crew, you should show respect for their hard work. You must always remember to be grateful because your success can't be separated from the support of these people behind the scenes." Yang Yi said a lot in one breath. Yang Huan was no longer angry and said softly, "I understand. I'll definitely respect everyone." "All right then. Speak less and listen more today. Listen to everyone's arrangement and don't be careless. Learn more from Zhu Jie and Xiao Guo." Yang Yi patted Yang Huan's shoulder and said in a gentle voice, "Figure out what you should do in the future." Yang Huan nodded softly. After alighting from the car, Zhu Jie, Guazi, and Yang Huan stood together while Yang Yi stood on the other side. He was surrounded by Yen Tao, Ran Min, Yun Yongfeng, and the rest. They were talking about something. Your brother is really strict. Zhu Jie turned around and glanced at Yang Yi. Then he lowered his voice and muttered to Yang Huan, Director Yen said that we mustn't rely on luck when recording the show. We must give it our all. Otherwise, we'll have to go back to where we came from. He was very strict. I thought Director Yen was fierce enough. I didn't expect him to be worse than your brother. That's... Yang Huan showed a hint of grievance. She pouted and said, But it's good enough for me. You haven't seen how he beat up my second brother. He was so ruthless. My second brother was beaten into obedience by him. Zhu Jie shuddered, recalling the terrifying experience when Yang Yi had dragged him to the abandoned factory. Actually, I've seen it too. I was ignorant back then and listened to my manager's nonsense. I kept pestering my aunt, saying that I wanted to create a scandal with Sister Murphy because it was easier to become famous that way. Zhu Jie chuckled bitterly and revealed his shameful past. I regretted it later and stopped before it was too late. Fortunately, Brother Yang forgave me. Zhu Jie was actually trying to get closer to Yang Huan and Guazi so that they could exchange secrets with each other. Guazi and Yang Huan looked at Zhu Jie in surprise. They did not know about these details as Yang Yi had never told anyone about it. What about your manager? Guazi asked. He ran away. The police couldn't find him. Zhu Jie did not want to talk about it in detail. He smiled and said, Actually, I think that we don't need to worry too much. We just need to pay attention to what we say. I don't think Master Huan is like what your brother said. He just wants you to be good. When you see the three teachers later, your attitude will naturally become respectful. Yeah, that's what I mean, Yang Huan said indignantly. But let me tell you, maybe you haven't done variety shows before and don't know that some actions and words that are out of line during the show are allowed. Sometimes, it's for the show's effect. Didn't Director Yen say that? We have to compete with all our strength. If we're timid in front of the seniors, the show will be boring. Zhu Jie said. What if they get angry? Guazi asked, confused. That won't happen. Before we record the program, we have to inform them in advance. There might be some offensive actions during the program. After the program, we have to sincerely explain and apologize. These teachers are all veterans in the entertainment industry. They will understand. Zhu Jie smiled. Understood. Guazi nodded. We're about the same age. You can speak more casually. Zhu Jie smiled and said, How tiring would it be if you talk like a junior? Just pay attention when you talk to the three teachers. Hearing Zhu Jie's words, Yang Huan relaxed and revealed a faint smile. How old are you, Jie? Guazi asked curiously. I'm 18 this year. Master Huan is 20. Zhu Jie had told Yang Huan and Guazi to call him a Jai when he introduced himself to them. Yang Huan glared at Guazi. How could he talk about a girl's age? I'm 25. But don't treat me like an old man. I'm still very young. Haha. Zhu Jie laughed. 25? Guazi said in surprise. Then you have to call him Brother Jie. I don't mind. After all, Master Huan is the oldest. Zhu Jie laughed. I'll kick the two of you to death. Yang Huan couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that the three of them were getting closer because they shared the same hatred for Yang Yi. Chapter 671. After a while, Yang Yi and the rest received Dan Hongkue, Yuan Yen, and Jie Yuchen. Actually, they were all familiar faces. Yuan Yen was a frequent guest on TV, Dan Hongkue had appeared in many movies, and Jie Yuchen was a professional. However, this was the first time Yang Huan, Guazi, Zhu Jie, and the others had come into contact with them. To their surprise, these old seniors, with high statuses, didn't put on airs. Dan Hongkue, who was the first to arrive, had a big smile on his face from beginning to end. Although his appearance was average, or rather, slightly ugly, and his body was thin, which was a bit contrary to his name, he had a kind of confidence that made people not dare to underestimate him. I was called here by Yuan Yen. He said that this show is fun, so he dragged me here. But he's not here yet. Don't be so formal, you're making me feel embarrassed. Dan Hongkue was amused. No wonder he had acted in so many comedies, and his actions were humorous. When chatting with Dan Hongkue, although Yang Huan and the other two treated him very respectfully, they were unconsciously drawn closer by Dan Hongkue's friendliness and didn't feel estranged. Compared to Yuan Yen, Dan Hongkue was truly a good friend. When Yuan Yen arrived, he was naturally chatting and laughing. However, his gentleness made him unfathomable. When Yang Huan saw Yuan Yen, he felt like he was looking at his acting teacher. He was trembling with fear, as if he was afraid that he would be caught by the teacher if he was distracted. Yuan Yen was very interested in Guazi. After chatting with Guazi for a while, he smiled and said to Dan Hongkue, "Old Dan, do you know? When I watched Fairy Tale, I felt that little Gua's acting was pretty good, but he's a little introverted and dull." Later on, Director Ren told me that little Gua wasn't introverted at all, but I didn't believe him. Although Yuan Yen called Dan Hongkue Old Dan, Dan Hongkue was actually a few years younger than Yuan Yen. It was just that Dan Hongkue, who was slightly uglier, looked older. "Do you believe me now? Haha, little Gua is the talkative one. Did you make a mistake?" Dan Hongkue joked. Guazi rubbed his nose awkwardly. Yang Huan was so scared that he didn't dare to speak. He couldn't help but blabber a lot under Yuan Yan's questions. Naturally, he was the one who spoke the most. "It's good that you made a mistake. This means that little Gua's acting skills are pretty good. She even fooled me by pretending to be an introvert." Yuan Yen smiled. "I heard that little Gua isn't a professional? Although she's also studying at Jiangqing Media University, she's not majoring in performing arts." No, I majored in electronic media," Guazi quickly replied. In front of Yuan Yen, he also felt a lot of pressure. After all, Yuan Yen was a teacher. Yang Yi added, "Mr. Yuan, Xiao Gua also wanted to take the acting major, but he was rejected by Jiang Chuan. Maybe it's because of his size." In the end, he didn't give up on his dream of becoming an actor. He passed the college entrance examination and returned to Jiangqing Media University to continue working hard. That requires a lot of perseverance and courage. Yuan Yen looked at Guazi in surprise and encouraged, "That's not bad. I feel that you have the potential. Continue to work hard. Where there's a will, there's a way. Mr. Yuan, please give him some pointers when you're free." Yang Yi smiled. Yuan Yen raised his eyebrows and looked at Yang Yi in surprise. He didn't expect that Yang Yi didn't mention his sister. Instead, he focused on helping Guazi. It seemed that this little fatty had a good relationship with Yang Yi. "It's better to learn from old Dan than from me." Yuan Yen smiled and said, "I'm also a professional. What I teach isn't suitable for little Gua's path. Little Gua's path is similar to old Dan's. He has to play every role well and perform the extraordinary in the ordinary. That's the key. TSK. TSK. Yuan Yen, you're setting a trap for me." Dan Hongkue smiled and pointed at Yuan Yen. However, he didn't agree or disagree. Instead, he changed the topic with a few words. Although these old foxes were chatting happily, they didn't like talking too much. If they wanted to gain their recognition, Guazi, Yang Huan, and the rest would have to continue working hard. Jie Yuchen, who was the same age as Yuan Yen, was the last to arrive. This man who often acted as emperors and masters of big families had a square face. He couldn't be considered handsome. If it was in the 60s or 70s, he would be more in line with the public's aesthetic standards. But if it was in the modern era, he might be a little tough and not handsome enough. But when he walked over from afar, he had a majestic aura. However, Yuan Yen and Dan Hongkue, who were more familiar with Jie Yuchen, looked at each other and smiled. Dan Hongkue even chuckled and said, "Old Jie is pretending again. There's something wrong with this person. He cares a lot about his image. If you can make him reveal his true colors in the show, The Limit Challenge will definitely be popular." Yuan Yen smiled and said to Yang Yi. Yang Yi smiled. "Our show pursues authenticity. We won't artificially arrange the roles that each of you has to play. In fact, in the continuous challenges, you can only use your true colors to deal with them. Otherwise, you might be exposed at any time. And we won't not film those scenes." Why did Dan Hongkue and the rest say that Jie Yuchen was pretending? Soon, Yang Yi and the rest saw that Jie Yuchen's cold expression was nowhere to be seen. He said with a smile, "Ju Jie, I know your songs are very interesting." "Teacher Jie, just call me Jie," Ju Jie said quickly. "Then don't call me teacher. Yuan Yen is the only teacher here." "Brother Yuchen." Ju Jie changed the way he addressed him. "That's right," Jie Yuchen said with a smile. "Among your songs, I think Impulsive Punishment is the most interesting. However, you have to be careful. If you keep singing these songs, you'll have a bad reputation among the girls." "Brother Yuchen, that's just what the lyrics say. I actually respect women very much," Ju Jie said with a bitter smile. "I'm just kidding. Haha. You're as handsome as me. Don't worry." Jie Yuchen patted Ju Jie's shoulder and said narcissistically, "That's enough, old Jie. Don't teach others bad things. These three are all children." Yuan Yen smiled. "Hey, don't underestimate children. Yuan Yen, you'll be at a disadvantage during the recording." Jie Yuchen turned his head and looked at the only female in the crowd other than Ran Lian, Yang Huan. "Sister, I heard from the director that you're very good at fighting. Is that true? Why don't you show us your skills?" Yang Yi didn't interfere with the conversation between the six of them. He just watched calmly from the side. Jie Yuchen was a natural socializer. He chatted with the three young people as if they were old friends who had not seen each other for years. Now, he called Yang Huan sister, in a more cordial tone. "Here." Yang Huan pointed at the parking lot of the airport in astonishment. They were about to get into the nanny van. "There's no one here and no reporters are following us. We're just having a few moves." Jie Yuchen turned into a joker and said with a smile. Yuan Yen and Dan Hongkue also looked over with interest. "Xiao Gua, come over here." Yang Huan had to call Guazi and ask him to stand in front of her. "How under me?" Guazi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He only wanted to say in his heart, "Why me again?" Yang Huan pressed on Guazi's shoulder and asked him to stand still. Then, she turned her back to Guazi. "What is she doing?" Jie Yuchen elbowed Dan Hongkue and asked curiously. How did Dan Hongkue know? However, in the blink of an eye, Yang Huan stomped her left foot on the ground, turned around, and pulled out her right leg. She raised it high and lashed it at Guazi like a whip. Her posture was graceful and fierce. It was like a martial arts move in the movies. She was going to hit Guazi's cheek. Everyone exclaimed in surprise. Guazi was stunned. Was he touched? He didn't dare to move. Chapter 672. At that time, her foot was only 1 centimeter away from my throat. Guazi was scared out of his wits. He thought that Yang Huan was going to put him down like she did when they first met. Of course, Yang Huan did not have such good kung fu. Her foot slowed down when it was far away from Guazi, and finally stopped on Guazi's shoulder. However, the wind from her foot still made Guazi's hair stand on end. Wow! Dan Hongkue and Jie Yuchen could not help but exclaim. Ju Jie was also dumbfounded by Yang Huan's vigorous figure and long legs. Although Yang Huan had a unique charm, Ju Jie could only think of luck at this moment. Luckily, he did not provoke Yang Huan. Previously, he was only in awe of Yang Yi. He didn't want to flirt with Yang Huan just because she was tall and beautiful. However, Now that he saw Yang Huan's valiant appearance, he couldn't bring himself to do so. Roses were beautiful, but they had thorns. Jie Yuchen waited until Yang Huan withdrew her foot, blushing. Then he clapped his hands and praised, "Amazing! Amazing! Sister, you can beat 3 of us by yourself. Don't drag me into this. Who wants to be old with you?" Dan Hongkue laughed. "Mr. Jie, of course, I will not use these skills in the recording," Yang Huan said embarrassedly. "No, you still need to show your skills occasionally. Yang Huan, the audience does not have a good impression of you. If you want to do well in the show, you have to be sure of your position." Yuan Yen hit the nail on the head. The more you are different from other women, the more you dare to challenge the male hosts and try your best to win. Only in this way will you leave a deep impression on the audience. Yang Huan was stunned. She understood and said gratefully, "Thank you, Mr. Yuan, for your guidance." After gathering, everyone discussed for a while and decided to let their assistants go to the hotel to pack up first. Yuan Yen and the others followed the nanny van sent by Yang Yi and went to Yang Yi's studio to visit and record songs. On the way, they did not stop talking. Jie Yuchen was humorous when he was not acting cool. Dan Hongkue could talk about anything. Yuan Yen was a man of few words, but he could always say the right thing. In this atmosphere, Guazi and the others were not so reserved and started to talk. They soon arrived at the Phoebe studio. Of course, there were 2 signs hanging at the door: Hua Yi Brothers Management Agency and Phoebe Studio. It was not hard to tell that Yang Yi's company. When they entered, they saw the hostess in casual clothes. Mo Fei was also playing in the studio today. She was a person who couldn't stay idle. Now that she was almost fully recovered, she gradually began to resume some of her work, such as recording songs. She wanted to record Fairy Town that she didn't record before, and Song of Pigs that she didn't know how to record, but she wanted to study the childlike singing style. There was also a recording studio at home, but Murphy still wanted to come to the studio with Yang Yi once in a while. Only by changing the environment could she maintain a happy mood. Of course, Murphy brought her children to the studio. How could there be so many rules in her own studio? She didn't have to avoid the media. She wasn't as secretive as Cici was back then. Everyone knew that she and Yang Yi had 2 children. Who could say anything when she openly brought her children to the studio to play? Even when recording songs, she sang with headphones while Tong Tong was lying in the cradle next to her. Wasn't this also a kind of music influence? Look at how happy the little guy was when he was listening to his mother sing. Maybe he was also very talented in music. Of course, when welcoming the guests, Murphy did not bring Tong Tong out. Instead, she asked Mo Shaowan to take care of him and left him in her studio. "Hello, Teacher Yuan, Teacher Shan, Teacher Jie. I've actually met Teacher Jie before." Murphy followed Yang Yi and greeted Yuan Yen and the others. However, when it came to Jie Yuchen, she turned around and smiled at Yang Yi. "Yes, the title song of Capital City that I acted in was sung by Murphy. We met in the crew at that time." Jie Yuchen remembered and was amused. He said, "This circle is not big, but it is not small either." At this moment, Yang Yi's ears twitched. He heard movement and turned his head to look. At the corner of the stairs in the hall, a small head and a big head peeked out. It was Shi and Xiao Ai. The little girl was peeking. Murphy did not allow her to disturb her father's work, but how could Shi stay in the recording studio? Shi, who was curious about what her father and mother were doing, bypassed Mo Shaowan, who was playing with Tong Tong, and sneaked out. She met Auntie Xiao Ai in the corridor. Xiao Ai was a good-tempered person. After being pestered by Shi for a while, Xiao Ai had no choice but to bring her down to take a peek. Cici's and her father's eyes met. The little girl cried out, "Aya!" and hurriedly retracted her little head. However, she was not sure if her father had noticed her little movements. Just like at noon, when she did not want to sleep, she would pretend to half close her eyes. After a while, she poked her little head out again and her black eyes rolled around. "Come here." Yang Yi smiled and waved at his daughter. Only then did Cici reveal a joyful smile and run to her father's side. "Hey, this little girl." Dan Hongkue was the first to notice and asked in surprise. "This is my daughter. I was worried about her being alone at home today, so I brought her along." Yang Yi smiled and explained to Dan Hongkue. Facing so many strangers, Shishi was a little embarrassed and squeezed into her father's arms. However, her big eyes were still looking at these uncles. "This is Shishi, right? I have read the Shishi's bedtime story that your father wrote for you." Yuan Yen also smiled kindly at Shishi and then said to Yang Yi, "My daughter also likes the storybook you wrote." "Really? Teacher Yuan, you can bring her along next time. She can play with Shishi." Yang Yi patted Shishi's little head and smiled at Yuan Yen. "Uncle Yuan's daughter is older than you. You have to call her sister in the future." Yang Yi saw his daughter looking at him curiously and smiled. After a while of small talk, they still had to get to the point. They came to Yang Yi's studio. In addition to the studio shared by Yang Yi and Murphy, it was the second studio with top equipment. However, it was a pity that none of the 6 people knew how to appreciate the equipment. Even Zhu Jie, who was a singer, could not tell the quality of the equipment. "Yang Yi, you don't often write songs for others. I saw that you have written songs for Chen Yijie, Murphy, and Guazi. It's rare to see a high-quality song. Those music companies outside must have racked their brains to invite you to write a song." Yuan Yen said to Yang Yi. Before Yang Yi responded, he turned to Dan Hongkue and the others and smiled. "We have made a big profit this time. Other people can't ask Yang Yi to write a song for them. Yang Yi wrote a song for us to sing." The few of them laughed out loud. Only Zhu Jie's expression was a little strange. There were some words that could not be said. Dan Hongkue smiled and said, "Teacher Yuan's words made my heart itch. I really want to hear the song immediately. It's not difficult. I will play the demo I recorded before and show it to you." Yang Yi sat in front of the console and turned on the equipment. The audio output was also switched from the monitoring headphones to the external sound system. Soon, the prelude of an electric guitar reverberated in everyone's eardrums. "How many times have I fallen on the road? How many times have I broken my wings?" As soon as Yang Yi's deep voice rang out, everyone present shuddered. It was also Yang Huan's first time listening to the song. She did not know why, but when she heard the first few lines, she felt hot blood fill her chest, as if there was a surge of energy gathering. That's right. The song that Yang Yi used for the Extreme Challenge was a representative song of half of the Chinese music industry in his previous life, Life in Bloom. This song was very popular in Yang Yi's previous life. Many people had sung it in high school, many had sung it during military training, and many had sung it when they were being brainwashed. Although it was about the same as Little Apple, it was the first time it appeared in this world. When Yuan Yen, Dan Hongkue, and the others heard it, it was a good song that made their blood boil. Zhu Jie was even more in awe of it. "I want life in bloom, like flying in the vast sky, like walking in the boundless wilderness, with the power to conquer the world. I want life in bloom, like standing at the top of the rainbow, like walking in the bright galaxy, with the power to challenge the limit." Of course, to match the theme, Yang Yi changed the lyrics. He changed "break free of everything" to "conquer the world," and "transcend the ordinary" to "challenge the limit." These changes did not affect the beauty of the song. Yang Yi's high pitch, like the majestic context of the lyrics, made the theme of the Extreme Challenge sublime. Just like when Luffy said that he wanted to be a pirate, his dream was not to be a pirate, but to conquer the universe. Needless to say, this song was like a war song. Just by listening to it, everyone was filled with energy. They could not help but want to challenge the limit with the show. "This is so good. Old Dan, Yuan Yen, I think this song is going to be a hit," Jie Yuchen exclaimed exaggeratedly after listening to the song. Yang Huan asked curiously, "Is this song called Extreme Challenge?" "No, it's called Life in Bloom." Yang Yi smiled. He did not plan to change the name of the other songs. That's good. Do you want your life to be liberated? Do you want your life to reach the top of the rainbow? Come and challenge the limit. Yuan Yen grabbed the air and looked into the void with his bright eyes, as if there was a camera filming him. This caused everyone to laugh one after another. They didn't expect that Yuan Yen, who was usually so serious, could play such a trick. The problem now is, who's going to sing this high pitch? I like to sing the first part, but I think I will break my voice at the end. Jie Yuchen said. It's simple. Xiao Jie can sing it. He can sing such a high-pitched song like Impulsive Punishment. Dan Hongkue smiled. Yeah. Jie Yuchen slapped his thigh. I don't think that's good. It's too domineering for me to sing so many parts alone, Ju Jie said quickly. And old Dan, don't forget that although old Dan is an award-winning actor, he has also practiced singing. When he was down and out, he even sang in a bar. Yuan Yen said. Then let's add more people. Yang Huan, come and sing. Dan Hongkue looked at Yang Huan. Ah. I don't know how to sing, Yang Huan said embarrassedly. You can't say no. How do you know if you don't try? Xiao Gua, come and give it a try. Dan Hongkue laughed and dragged the others into the water. It was better to have fun together than to have fun alone. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.